Chapter 1044. The failure of Surima city could not be blamed on the nobles and tyrant, who were the successors of Ravenkay's. Ravenkay's first victory was an abnormal product, and it could not even be said to be lucky. It was simply a matter of extreme risk to count on when the ultimate weapon in the hands of the enemy would be activated. The power of the Well of Eternity was cut off by Duque, and most of the elven mages died. Furthermore, in order to make up for their first failure, the Burning Legion gathered many times the combat power of the elven army every time they attacked. Manaroth led more than 10 Void Lords to charge together. How could the elves, who did not have that many heroic domain masters, resist? That's right, when Moon Goddess Alun contacted the dragons to support them, the dragons were also unlucky. At this point in time, even though the dragons had the largest number, ever since the formation of the dragon army in Azeroth, they had never experienced any large-scale battles. The dragons with some experience were mostly land battles, and they usually went to bully the giants on the ground. They did not have the corresponding aerial combat experience. Even though they had a natural advantage in terms of physical strength, the dragons were at a great disadvantage against the aerial forces of the Apocalypse Guards, which were 10 times their number. There was a huge difference in experience and numbers. As soon as the two sides clashed, the dragons were shot down like turkeys. Tyrant, Illidan, and Ronan, who were watching the battle from the ground, were stunned and did not know what to say. The number of dragons and Apocalypse Guards that fell was about 1 to 2, but the problem was that the Burning Legion had more aerial forces. The Apocalypse Guards covered the sky, and it seemed like there was no end to them. Originally, when the 5 dragon aspects attacked together, they had indeed suppressed the demon army. Their combat power was unparalleled, but ever since the appearance of the almost indomitable super demon Archimonde, the 5 dragon aspects had suffered a setback. Ronan was dumbfounded. Only at this moment did he realize how lucky his group was to defeat Archimonde 10,000 years later. That was because Archimonde had most of his power suppressed. This Archimonde had used the powerful power of the Well of Eternity to directly break through the planet's defense circle and summon his complete form. At his peak, Archaron's was simply an invincible existence. The claws of the 5 dragon aspects could not even leave a deep wound on his body. Even if they scratched a meter-deep wound, it would be perfectly repaired by the power of darkness in the next instant. Of all times, the damn Nethario jumped in the wrong direction. Just like in history, he used the demon's soul to trap the dragon race. In his desperation, Krasus was willing to risk changing history to persuade the Red Dragon Queen not to inject her power into the dragon's soul. However, he was not an official member of the dragon race in this time and space, so his advice was ignored. Bad news came one after another. Tyrant, who had exhausted all of her mana on the battlefield, had been captured by the Satyr King Savis. This was undoubtedly a bolt out of the blue for Illidan, who was the only one left. Seeing Illidan's uncertain expression, Ronan finally realized that he had to pull the last force of Azeroth into the fray as soon as possible. He said to Grom and the others, "You guys stay in Fort Raven. I'll go find Cenarius." Originally, it would have been best to let Malfurion, the eldest disciple of Cenarius, negotiate, but Malfurion's soul was trapped. Ronan could only bite the bullet and go. In the city of Azeroth, Duque looked at the huge empty shelf in a daze. Without enough mana to tear open the dimensional barrier reinforced by the planet's magic circle, this portal was destined to be a decoration. However, it was Archimonde's job to deal with the Guardian or plunder enough mana. Du's bad taste kicked in, and he made the portal that was supposed to greet Sargeras into the style of the Dark Portal. The portal that was filled with the evil wind of darkness even gained the appreciation of the twins of Erida. The pair of beautiful demon sisters even hinted that Duque could have a friendly conversation with them at night to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. As an upright and reliable young man, Duque decisively refused. "Oh. That's a pity. Infernal affairs, you clearly exude the scent of a female." Elisa's licked her coquettish lips. "Actually, sometimes I even feel that you're not a part of the Burning Legion. Compared to those violent and barbaric fellows, you're too law-abiding. Although the Legion doesn't mind adding some capable and disciplined strong people," Queen Sailoras said pointedly. Duque opened his hands in a serious manner, and two extremely pure black flames emerged from his palms. Sorry, I love power the most. Only power is my ultimate pursuit. Hee hee. No one said that it's bad to pursue power. But other than power, other Eridar warlocks also have their own pursuits, such as, the twins probed faintly, or rather, they were guiding Duque's attention. In fact, Duque had long discovered that a high elf lady was happily chatting with an Eridar warlock in the bushes 100 yards away. Duque knew that he couldn't stay here any longer. Before accomplishing his ultimate goal of tricking the Burning Legion, Duque had to pretend to be a fallen person who yearned for the life of a demon. The problem was that he was too obedient and followed the rules. Previously, Jaden had counted on him to open the door for Archimonde to descend, and the other small details could be ignored. Now that Archimonde had descended, in fact, Duque was no longer a necessary candidate for the Legion in Azeroth. If Duque wanted to carry out his plan, he had to continue to stay in the core position of the Legion. Then, he had to think of ways to discredit himself and continue to gain Jaden's trust. It wasn't easy to deceive a demon commander. Duque was already thinking if he should find a chance to go to the front lines and slaughter thousands of night elves. On the other side, the twins were still egging Duque on. Actually, I know that Lord Sargeras doesn't like people like Queen Azhara. That's right. He had a strong taste and liked Garona. If you like, you can totally take that so-called queen, and then use your identity as a high-rank lord to announce that these high elves are your exclusive slave race. Sigh, I haven't even succeeded yet, and I'm already tearing down the plank? Duque shrugged helplessly. It's a pity that I don't like to climb trees, and I don't like to climb a tree with dark purple bark. Auras rolled her eyes. What about her? Duque suddenly saw the figure of the priestess who had pale purple skin and was a little shorter than him. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 1045. Duque was someone who paid attention to the bigger picture. If he did not, he would have been destroyed during the first Dark Portal. Even though he was known as the destroyer of history, he was still trying his best to control the direction of the bigger picture and make Azeroth's situation better. Duque was a very timid person. But it was this kind of person who could always burst out with unimaginable courage when he was forced into a corner, slaying demons and ghosts along the way, even earning himself the title of a great hero. The conflicted Duque was, of course, very clear about the current situation. If he did not get rid of the Burning Legion during the War of the Ancients, or if he was exposed and died here, then everything would be over. If he did not get rid of the Burning Legion, Azeroth would be a land of death in 10,000 years. At the same time, Nosdorm would definitely be killed now, not 10,000 years later. If he died here, even if the outcome of the War of the Ancients was the same, it would be meaningless. Thus, preserving himself and maintaining the original outcome of the War of the Ancients were parallel and not conflicting. Duque never thought of himself as a saint who was compassionate and wanted to save all the innocent in the world. Thus, people and things that went against these 2 points could be sacrificed when necessary. Even if millions of elves had died since the start of the War of the Ancients, he did not have any psychological burden. To Duque, this was no different from when he commanded the Alliance's soldiers on the battlefield during the War of the Dark Portal and World War II. But when he saw Tyrande, this old comrade, Duque felt his balls ache. Just a second ago, he had used the excuse of not wanting to climb a tree to reject Gemini's probing. The next second, Tyrande, what was the meaning of this? Even if he was unjustly attacked, this was not the way to lie down. This was like a beautiful back flip 10 times and then a 3,600-degree flip to the side to hit the muzzle of a gun. Do you want me to slap myself in the face and pretend to be gay? Do you believe that Gemini will immediately find a few strong and handsome men to trick me? Moreover, with a female demon like Gemini, it was obvious whether Tyrande had entered Duque's aesthetic range or not. At this moment, Duque suddenly entered a huge crisis that concerned his life and the survival of his soul. As long as he took a single wrong step, he would immediately be consigned to eternal damnation. Of course, as a traitor, he could immediately kill his way out of Azhara City and return to the Night Elves' side. However, if that were to happen, how would he be able to continue with the act of an egg pretending to rebel? If he rebelled and the Burning Legion didn't believe Illidan and killed him, then this show wouldn't be able to continue. Duque swallowed his saliva. Gemini immediately understood what Seiji meant. Auraza's eyes were like silk. Hee hee. No wonder our Lord of the Infernal Affairs doesn't like ordinary goods. Queen Salola's even came closer and blew a breath of hot air on Duque's neck. A high priest of the indigenous gods. This is indeed something that those coquettish bitches can't compare to. Infernal affairs, good eyes. What else could he say in the face of such unreliable likes from the Eridar twins? The only thing he could do in the spiritual world was to put on his signature 45-degree tearful pose. Actually, you guys don't understand my heart. I am innocent. I'm just a lowly and cowardly university animal. Which one of you will give me a yellow river? I want to wash away the stain on my name as the Duke of Beasts. Savis, who had become the Satyr King, strode into the hall with a few high elves who had voluntarily become satyrs. The unconscious Tyrant, who was being carried by the back of her collar and swinging around like a puppet, not only attracted the attention of Duque and the others, but also the other Void Lords. Yo, Savis, looks like you brought back a good toy. A Lord of Morgur walked toward Savis. Morgur was a one-story tall humanoid demon. At first glance, it looked like an extremely burly humanoid fatty. Upon closer inspection, one would notice that it had a thick and deformed arm, as well as a huge foot with only 2 sharp toes. Savis frowned when he saw the newcomer, especially when he saw the skulls of the night elf priestesses tied around his waist that were filled with fear and malevolent expressions. Barbaro. This is the high priest of the moon goddess Elun, Tyrant Whisperwind. Savis seemed to emphasize. So what? I love torturing and killing the priestesses of the indigenous gods. Although many of them are still calling out their god's name until the last moment of their lives, most of them crumble when they see me torturing and killing their companions. They pray that I won't hurt them. But, hee hee. Evidently, the row of heads was the result of those who begged for mercy. Yo, Infernal, aren't you going to snatch that priestess? Once she falls into Barbaro's hands, she'll be gone soon. Queen Saloras incited Duque. At this moment, something unexpected happened. Perhaps it was Barbaro's foul breath that woke Tyrant up. Tyrant retaliated the moment she woke up. An unsuccessful counterattack. Savis, who was still carrying Tyrant, defeated her counterattack with a single spell. Originally, Barbaro should have grabbed Tyrant and pierced her body with his claws. But at this moment, a miracle happened. Tranquil moonlight suddenly shone from Tyrant's body, forming billions of tiny white runes that wrapped around her like a white veil. As the Lord of Morgur, Barbaro's deformed and thick arms could easily crush a dwarven steam tank into dough. However, his claws could not penetrate the 5 centimeters of space on Tyrant's body. It was a miraculous layer of absolute protection. What power is this? In a fit of rage, Barbaro grabbed Tyrant's petite body and flung her away. Tyrant was thrown into a daze. Huh. This time, it wasn't just Duque. Even the other lords were interested in Tyrant. There were more than 10 lords in this hall. Most of them had just been teleported here and were still waiting for orders to go to the front lines. They all gathered and began to attack Tyrant with all sorts of methods. It was obvious that Elun was displaying her miracles to these barbaric void lords. The lords could seal Tyrant's attack power and even knock her unconscious, but they could not truly harm or torture her. The lords howled, but there was nothing they could do. This made Duque secretly heave a sigh of relief. According to the original history, the demon lords, who were at their wits' end, could only imprison Tyrant. Then, there was the legendary scene of Tyrant's escape. Suddenly, Elisa sneered. You useless things. Since you can't deal with her, then scram. Saloras put a hand on Duque's shoulder. Oh, infernal affairs, as long as you nod, we can help you deal with this Tyrant. Duque spat out a mouthful of blood. Damn it. Chapter 1046. The other lords have already given up on healing. What are you doing here, Gemini? Scram to the side. If Tyrant managed to escape in 2 days, everything would be fine. Duque really wanted to give Gemini a few slaps. Just then, Duque suddenly thought of another problem. This seemed to be his fault. Without Duque stirring up trouble within the Burning Legion, Gemini would not have come to Azhara. Also, because he had many subordinates, in order to temporarily stabilize the High Elves, he ended up giving the High Elves a large number of demonic crystals. Now, the Queen and her subordinates were deeply grateful to the Burning Legion. In history, once the Archaerons descended, the entire Legion ignored the High Elves who had lost their value. If he remembered correctly, it should be Kale, that's grandfather, Dasrima Sunstrider, who felt abandoned by the Burning Legion and chose to turn to the light. He released Tyrande, which led to Tyrand's miraculous return. Coupled with the fact that Goddess Elune had endorsed Tyrande and publicly praised her for her steadfastness, the arcane faction had been eliminated and most of the nature faction's demigods had knelt down. This was how Tyrande, as the High Priestess, was able to rise to power. Alright, it's all a mess now. Even if Goddess Elune protected Tyrande, no one would be able to release Tyrande. Just as Duque was thinking, the female demon Elises came up to add fuel to the fire. Oh, infernal affairs. Do you like this woman? Say something for us sisters. Seeing that he could not avoid it, Duque decided to show off. His domineering gaze swept across the place as he sneered softly. Since no one can handle it, then let Gemini handle it. Most of the people here were mid-level or low-level lords. With Duque, a high-level void lord, speaking, of course, they did not dare to have any objections. At this time, Queen Sailoras smirked. By the way, Your Excellency, this is a private matter. Duque firmly believed that Elune would definitely protect Tyrande, so he did not hesitate to show off to the end. He elegantly turned around and walked away. As he left, he said, "Hee hee." It was obvious that unless the 3 heavyweights of the Burning Legion took action, no one would be able to do anything to this woman. Well, 2,000 top-grade demonic crystals, I bet you can't handle it. If you really can't do anything to her, just throw her into the highest level prison and lock her up for now. On the other side, Tyrande was being tormented by the group of Void Dukes. However, she stubbornly stood up and glared at Duque's back. She did not understand the language of Eridar, but she instinctively felt that this group of evil and violent lords were using her as a wager. A pair of purple and a pair of crimson Eridar demon hooves stood in front of Tyrande. Tyrande raised her head and looked at the 2 beautiful faces filled with mockery and malice. She felt like vomiting. She really wanted to turn her angry gaze into the moon god's arrow and shoot these 2 bewitching demonesses in front of her. Unfortunately, with her power completely sealed, it was difficult for her to even move a finger. Let's go, beauty. Let Big Sister teach you how to be a qualified slave. Elisa spoke in perfect Kadorai language. Humph. Don't even think about it. I will never give in. Tyrande's voice was sonorous and forceful. That might not necessarily be the case. Queen Sailoras smiled wickedly. Tyrande could not help but feel her heart palpitate as she looked at the pair of eyes filled with absolute confidence. The great moon goddess Elune will definitely protect me. As if in response to her vow, the faint layer of white light around Tyrande seemed to become even brighter. Suddenly, Gemini grabbed both of Tyrande's arms and lifted her up. Let's go. Beauty. Let us tell you, at first, it was 1 sentence each, but in the end, it was Gemini who spoke at the same time. There are many places in this world where the moon cannot shine. Tyrande felt her heart beating wildly. For the first time in her life, she realized that anxiety and hesitation could swallow her heart. It was late at night. Duque had a side hall in the magnificent Azhara Palace. Archimonde had come and gone, and the High Elves had reaped the benefits. Queen Azhara almost wanted to give her main hall to Duque. At this time, Duque really could not sleep. According to the script, once Illidan pretended to be under Sargeras and stole the demon's soul, everything would be settled. Why did this mess with Tyrande happen? Duque's face was full of gloom. Damn, Elune, you have to do your best. That's your high priestess, your chosen one. You can't even protect her, and you're counting on me, an outsider? In the end, this is all Nozdormu's fault. Damn it. If you didn't throw me into the twisting nether and let me be a hero of justice, go through the motions, you'd be good, I'd be good, everyone would be good. Then everyone would be happy. Speaking of which, I'm feeling uneasy tonight. Something big must have happened. No, I have to confirm my escape route. Just as Duque was letting his imagination run wild, in the long river of history, Nozdormu, who had been cursed by Duque, had actually been working. An ancient force violently attacked Nozdormu's dragon body. His time dragon body could easily traverse time and the void, but at this moment, he had a terrifying premonition that he was about to be torn to pieces. The four major elements of earth, water, fire, and wind were driven by a primitive and uncontrollable mysterious force, spinning wildly around his body. Not to mention the time point of the ancient war 10,000 years ago, even if he forced himself to stay where he was, he would have a premonition that his life would be in danger at any time. The mysterious force in front of him was getting more and more terrifying. Nozdormu estimated that even if he forced himself to resist, he wouldn't be able to last until the ancient war. Nozdormu sighed, and suddenly spat out a small dragon's breath in front of him. After that, the giant time dragon king seemed to be pulled by something, and was suddenly pulled back to the door of darkness 15 years ago. This strange dragon's breath, which was like a small flying arrow, easily passed through thousands of blurry scenes and everything in the world. It suddenly passed through the barrier of time and space, and silently appeared behind Duque. Originally, the situation in the next moment should have been the gathering of a large amount of time power, continuously attacking Duque's senses. Nozdormu would never know that in order to prevent Duque from being frightened or confused, he had set up a few more mental barriers. All inquiries had to be filtered by the system elf before reaching Duque's senses. In the end, Duque had no idea what was going on. At this moment, Duque was shocked to find that the door to his bedroom had been pushed open. Tyrant, who was wearing a long white nightgown, flashed in. There was no trace of moon god power on her body. Duque was dumbfounded. Chapter 1047. The Burning Legion was not going to be easy. Duque knew this from the first day he crossed over to the world of Azeroth. Duke's balls ached as he looked at the system's highlighted red outline on his retina. The Eridar Gemini was hiding in a house 100 meters away. Their devil horns and hooves were clearly outlined, and Duke's balls ached. This was the Gemini's test, and also Kill Jaden's test. A person who did not know how to conquer, destroy, or kill, no matter how strong he was, could not be given such a heavy responsibility. If Duque dared to escape with Tyron now, Archimonde might come back with a group of Lords of the Abyss in the next moment. The moonlight was as calm as water, flowing on Tyron's body. However, it was as if flowing water had hit an invisible barrier, and the moonlight was repelled. Duque was stunned. This was not because Elune refused to bless Tyrande, but because Tyrande was using her own will to resist Elune's power entering her body. Tyrande's nightgown was not tied with a rope. She was purely using her left hand to pull the left hem over the right. It was this half-naked action that made Duque's mouth dry up. Yes. Duque could not deny that he was actually a fan of elves. This was evident from the fact that he had 3 high elves in his house. As for Tyrande, who had been imagined by countless players as a doujinshi, Duque did have a slight desire in his heart. Originally, there would not have been anything, but in the shadow form, especially when the dark energy in his body was not converted for a long time. Duque was stunned to discover that his body had a kind of restless feeling. This feeling was not good. It was the temptation of darkness. Duque secretly took a deep breath, then pretended to be ignorant. Huh? Why don't you let your goddess protect you? Tyrande, who had been silent all this while, suddenly erupted like a volcano. Her eyebrows furrowed, and an expression of anger appeared on her face. Demon! What are you pretending for? You were the one who instructed those 2 damned female demons to bring me to the twisting nether and threaten me with the safety of over 100 of my sisters. Are you still going to pretend to be innocent here? All right. As you wish. I'm here. Tyrant was obviously gritting her teeth in anger, but as she spoke, her aura weakened. Her originally fierce steps became soft and small, and she finally knelt in front of Duque. 2 streams of tears rolled down Tyrant's beautiful face. She sobbed uncontrollably. As long as you promise to let my sisters go and not kill them, I will fulfill my promise and become your possession. Duque's teeth hurt. His balls hurt. His head hurt. His entire body hurt. He finally understood what Gemini had done. Elun was indeed amazing. She was actually able to protect Tyrant in the midst of the enemy's formation. But in history, it was only preserved because there were no intelligent demons like the Gemini twins. Gemini had broken Elun's seemingly invincible protection with just a little trick. They used a portal to bring Tyrant back to the twisting nether. Of course, Elun's power could not reach the twisting nether. As a result, they used a large amount of dark energy to wash away the protective barrier on Tyrant's body. The moment the barrier was broken, Tyrant's final trump card was shattered mercilessly. Needless to say, Gemini was very good at playing with people's hearts. They could have used violence to make Tyrant submit, but they chose a more effective method, taking hostages. The priestesses of Elun were like sisters, and that was how the famous Elun sisterhood came to be. Since that was the case, everything became simple. In fact, Gemini could have made Tyrant submit completely. But they were afraid that Duque would lose interest, and that was how things turned out. Duque knew that there was no way to resolve this matter peacefully. He frowned and flicked his left hand. 2 dark rays pierced through the wall and shot at Gemini, who was hiding 100 meters away. The attack was vicious, but there was a smile on his face. Hey! It's not polite to peek. Can you two please stay away from me? Duque did not intend to kill, and Gemini took it as a friendly invitation to leave. Gemini's bewitching giggles resounded in the night sky. This caused Tyrant's expression to change again. At this moment, sitting on a luxurious 3-seater sofa, the dark energy around Duque's body expanded, forming a huge black fog. Duque said in a deep voice, "Since you have sworn to become my possession, then come over." Tyrant's body trembled, and the tears in her eyes flowed even more. In the end, she stood up slowly, as if she had made up her mind to fall into the abyss, and stepped into the black fog. Unexpectedly, she was caught the moment she stepped in, and sat on Duque's lap. "Tyrant, you've met Roddick and the others, right?" "I'm Roddick's teacher." Tyrant's body trembled again. She never would have thought that the spellcaster that Roddick spoke of, who was hiding within the Burning Legion, was actually such a high-ranking Void Lord, the future star of the Burning Legion, the spellcaster. "You." "Impossible." Tyrant's eyes widened. "I also hoped that I wouldn't run into you. But the commander of the Burning Legion, Jaden, has already started to suspect me." Duque could be considered a straightforward person, and he explained in detail that he had mistakenly entered the twisting nether, and was caught as a test subject. In the end, he was modified by dark energy, and became a lord. Aside from the fact that he and his group had transmigrated 10,000 years later, Duque told Tyrant everything about himself and his plans. Tyrant was so shocked that she could not close her mouth. This sounded like a fantasy story. "Spellcaster, you said that you purposely infiltrated the enemy camp to destroy the Burning Legion's main force, and then waited for the dragon aspects, Dragon Soul, to cooperate with you to blow up the portal and destroy the Burning Legion's main force?" Tyrant could not keep up with Duque's train of thought. In the end, she was stunned by Duque's huge and crazy plan. "You've been to the twisting nether, and the Eridar twins should have shown you how huge the Burning Legion's fleet is, and how many demons there are, right?" Tyrant recalled the countless dark-powered starships in the sky, and then the demonic army that filled every single one of them, and she shuddered. She could not help but nod. There are too many demons. If we just let the Azeroth race fight them, they won't be able to kill them all even if they die 100 times. And as long as the demons don't die in the twisting nether, they can be resurrected infinitely. My plan is to destroy the Burning Legion's main force once and for all. But there's a precondition. Tyron's voice trembled as she continued, "You can't be exposed." "Yes. Make your choice. I can give you a chance to contact Alun. If you choose to leave, I will take you with me. It all depends on who will complete my plan. Of course, you can also choose to make a sacrifice." Chapter 1048. Tyrande was dumbfounded. If not for the fact that millions of her brethren had been slaughtered by demons, she would not have been so sad and angry. If not for the fact that she could not resist the spread of evil, she would not have been captured and sent here. If not for the fact that she had seen with her own eyes how huge the Burning Legion's fleet was, she would not have felt so afraid. Perhaps Duque had given her a choice, but Duque, who did not feel the reality of the elves being slaughtered, did not realize that Tyrande was actually forced into a dead end. Suddenly, Tyrande's body stopped trembling, and her eyes that were starting to lose focus became determined again. She did not turn back, and just sat on Duque's lap and said, "Can you pray for me one last time? I want to report what happened to you to Goddess Alun." "Yes." The black fog that enveloped the two dispersed. Tyrande walked slowly towards the window with graceful steps. There, a large cluster of pure white moonlight illuminated a large piece of marble floor, making it look as if it was daytime. Gently taking off his nightgown, Duque, who was sitting on the sofa, saw a bewitching figure. The priestess began her prayer devoutly. Looking from behind, the towering peaks of Hyjal were actually wrapped around by two small golden snakes that emitted a demonic aura. The top of the snake's head was holding the small protruding stump of the world tree in its mouth. Duque suddenly felt that the dark energy in his heart seemed to be restless. The moonlight was incomparably gentle and beautiful. The pure and beautiful moonlight formed a sharp contrast with this perfect and seductive female figure. The prayer did not continue for long. Tyrande turned back, revealing a beautiful face that was either crying or smiling. If one ignored the faint purple capillaries on her fair face, Duque suddenly realized that she really did look a little like the Windrunner sisters. The same determination, the same love for their brethren, and the same willingness to sacrifice themselves. Tyrande turned around without a word, and once again stepped into Duque's black fog, allowing the black fog to envelop her. She knew that this was because Duque had blocked all probing from the outside world. Duque's voice was dry. "What did Alun say?" Tyrande sat down beside Duque, not bothering to hide the bitterness on her face. She said, "I'm sorry, my child." Duque slapped his forehead. Damn it. He was speechless towards Alun. But if it was Alun, perhaps she had no other choice. There had been too many sacrifices, and no one knew how much more they would have to pay to see the dawn of victory. In the face of a terrifying enemy like the Burning Legion, a priestess was nothing. Duque turned around and looked at Tyrande with a pained expression. At this moment, he finally understood why Tyrande hated him so much when they first met 10,000 years later. It was because he had returned to the ancient war and caused such a mess. If he was Tyrande, he would also hate him for 10,000 years. However, this fallacy was also a pain in the ass. Duque, who had been in the dark portal for 15 years, had returned to the ancient war and offended Tyrande 10,000 years ago. In the end, Tyrande had taken revenge 10,000 years later. Thinking of how much Tyrande hated him at that point in time, Duque decided to go all out. Holding to Mount Hyjal, Duque spouted nonsense with a straight face. Everything is for the sake of destroying the Burning Legion, for the sake of victory. So. I'm sorry. Tyrande clenched her teeth, and her cheeks were almost bleeding. She nodded heavily. I have long since sworn to give everything I have to Alun. Since this is the will of the goddess, I have no regrets. All right, Miss Offering, please accept this terrifying combo from another world. Invented by Mr. Jean and brought to glory by Lord Wei, the godly technique, picking up girls, sob sob, 10 minutes later. Please accept this invincible technique from Dongying from another world, Ito 48 hands. You. Duque had been fine at first, but the problem was that Duque's illness had flared up. For no reason at all, the 7 major sins, which had not flared up for more than 10 years, suddenly flared up. Which one was it? Make a guess. If you guess wrong, it's my loss. Tyron felt bitter on the spot. She had been shot. It was like a little girl who believed in the existence of Santa Claus had suddenly been fed more than 10 terabytes of action movies by a bad guy. Even though priestesses had regenerative abilities that surpassed priests, Tyrant Whisperwind. Unfortunately, tragedy still befell her. The next morning, Duque, who had finally broken free from the 7 major sins state, could not find any words to describe this tragic battlefield. Wait. I need some quiet time. Alright, fortunately, no one here would ask who Quiet Time was. Just as Duque assumed the pose of the thinker, a pair of eyes filled with anger, fear, humiliation, obedience, resignation, and other incomparably complex emotions met his. For a moment, Duque almost thought that he would have to endure 100 Starfall attacks. But in the end, it was Tyrant who silently helped Duque put on his clothes. Seeing that Duque was still shrouded by the black fog, Tyrant pretended to be very docile as she hugged Duque from behind. The two of them were pressed together, and with her still tear-stained face, she said something that did not match her expression at all. Don't lie to me. Otherwise, even if I die, my goddess and my sisters will hunt you down to the ends of the universe. Duque took a deep breath. I will definitely do my best to destroy the main force of the Burning Legion. At the very least, these demons will not be able to invade Azeroth for the next 10,000 years. I will remember your vow. Tyrant's expression was as gentle as water, but she was actually gritting her teeth as she spoke. At first, Tyrant had wanted to pretend to be a tamed slave and follow Duque out. Unfortunately, the moment she stood up, she immediately knelt down. She was so ashamed that she wanted to die. She tried to use the holy light to heal herself before continuing. The problem was that there was a kind of pain that was called residual pain. She could only give up. Duque sighed and walked out of the hall. As expected, he saw Eridar's Gemini with a mocking expression. Haha. Not bad, infernal affairs. We really did not misjudge you. Facing the Gemini's, you know what I mean, expression, Duque's face was full of righteousness, as if he did not understand what they were saying. The more Duque behaved like this, the more the Gemini believed that Duque had fallen. At this moment, outside of Azeroth, a knight wearing a hood and riding a Shadowmaw panther approached the city walls. The hellhounds that were wandering outside the city were easily sucked dry by him. He almost killed his way all the way to the front of the city wall. A gate that had been strengthened with magic blocked him. The night elf guards who were loyal to the queen were glaring at him with their heads lowered. He walked forward and took off his hood. He was the famous Illidan Stormrage. I am here to serve my queen. Illidan shouted. He was obviously not shouting at the guards. He was shouting at someone in the palace, I am here to serve my queen, and the leader of the Burning Legion. Chapter 1049. That day, Duque was a little bored. As the person in charge of the Burning Legion in Azhara, Duque needed to ensure that the forward operating base of Azhara would not fall. As for the portal that Salus always used, it was just a decoration. Everyone knew that before killing the dragon aspect or obtaining a stronger source of magic, it could not be opened. Jaden did not rush Duque, and he was happy to be at ease. After browsing through the battle reports of the Burning Legion's higher-ups on the magic mirror that could transmit information, Duque yawned. Basically, all paths were swept away, and there was no resistance at all. Only the northwest side of Old Kalimdor near Mount Hyjal, the Burning Legion was stuck in a quagmire of resistance. This was because a large number of demigods in Azeroth had made their move. They tried to counterattack the Legion, consciously avoiding Archimonde and only targeting the other legions on the flanks. The Burning Legion lost a few lords and returned to the Twisting Nether. Archimonde was furious, and sent a few of the more capable lords who were on standby in Azhara to the front lines. But this had nothing to do with Duque. The queen invited me to watch a dance? Duque tilted his head when he received the message from the 3 elven maids. Initially, Duque did not want to go, but Duque did not want to go back to his palace, because he did not know how to face Tyrant. After some thought, Duque agreed. After handing over some trivial matters to the Gemini, Duque went to the queen's palace. Azhara was obviously surprised that Duque had agreed to watch the dance. After all, Duque had been using work as an excuse to avoid the invitations of the High Elves. For a period of time, Azhara almost thought that Duke was a stubborn demon who was extremely self-disciplined and difficult to deal with. With Archimonde's arrival and the supply of high-purity demonic crystals to the High Elves, as well as the news she received last night, Azhara's view of Duque had changed. Before Sardra's arrived, her dream of becoming the Demon Queen was temporarily over. The commander of the army, Archimonde, was also a typical warrior, a boorish man. Azhara, who could not find any connections, seemed to want to invest more in Duque. Duque saw through this but did not point it out. After all, Queen Azhara was not a good person. Invest. Just invest as much as you want. In any case, regardless of whether I succeed or fail, you will suffer a loss. If I can't make you die, consider it my loss. Duque made up his mind. If Azhara dared to throw a sugar-coated bullet at him, then he would eat the sugar and send the bullet flying back. After some small talk, Duque sat on the sofa beside Queen Azhara's lounge chair. With a look from Queen, the band next to her immediately started playing. Unlike the pure and natural Night Elves' music, the High Elves' music could be said to be decadent. This was an era without violins, but there were harps and unknown stringed instruments similar to the zither of the Night Elves. Accompanied by the provocative sound of the harp and soft percussion, the heavy curtain that covered the roof suddenly opened. It was an elven girl with fair skin. She danced a rather gentle elven dance to the music. The accompaniment gradually became more intense, and the girl's dance became more and more relaxed. Soon, it was no longer that relaxed. Duque could feel the explosive feeling in his mind. She threw Duque a flying glance, her snow-white dress fluttering in the surging wind. Following the ever-changing rhythm, the elven girl kept moving her fair and flat abdomen. Her 5 fingers that were as white as spring onions gently spread out, her pinky and ring fingers curving inwards towards her palm. Intentionally or unintentionally, she stuck out her Atlank Mountains. That's right, it was not as high as Tyrant's, but it was still a grade lower than the Atlank Mountains, and it had the whiteness of a snow mountain. Obviously, Night Elves would not have such skin color. Duque could even feel that this should be some kind of exaggerated magical transformation. Queen Azhara was also very efficient, coming up with it in one night. Duque suddenly smiled bitterly. But this was also to his liking. At least it was better than looking at purple High Elves every day and thinking that they might have a purple child. The elven girl waved her perky arms with all her might. Her bare feet were as white as snow, and she displayed all of her beauty with her extremely fast and complicated body movements. The fast dance steps were like the European foxtrot. Her dancing was sometimes elegant, sometimes sensual, sometimes charming, and sometimes mysterious. Furthermore, because there was not much cloth on her upper body, only 2 palm-wide cloth straps that wrapped from the back of her neck to the front of her chest, the girl's dance also had the alluring characteristics of a belly dance, and it was too much for the eyes to take in. Her expression was so confident, so proud, so ambiguous, and so seductive. It was as if she was the goddess of beauty, Venus. Everything was so seductive, and full of beauty. Duque seemed to be in a trance. It was as if the elven girl in front of him had completely overlapped with the artificial beauties in South Korea before he transmigrated. As she wriggled, a large piece of the elven girl's long skirt fell off, and he could see an opening that looked like a cheongsam from the side, revealing the sexy and slender side of her thighs. As she wriggled, she kicked off her high heels, revealing a pair of smooth and small feet. As she wriggled, the queen had quietly left the scene, and the curtains blocked the surroundings. It was as if only the girl and Duque were left in the whole world. Without a doubt, this elven girl was a seductress-level beauty. Her body was a mixture of an angel and a demon. Angels had the fairest skin, while demons had the most voluptuous bodies. The seductress had two great advantages, and that seductive dance was enough to arouse the interest of any man in the world. Looking at the elven girl who was already kneeling between his legs and secretly showing off her beauty, and looking at him with an expectant gaze, Duque's balls ached. He, who was still in a state of back pain, was powerless. "You're not bad. Did Her Majesty say anything to you?" Duque's lips curled into a smile. "From today onwards, I'm the possession of Lord Infernal Affairs." The girl was trembling a little. Her eyes were filled with passion and fear. She was afraid that Duque would reject her. She couldn't imagine that she had committed such a great sin and had to change her body. Her skin had become fair, and it was impossible for her to change back. Just like her compatriots who had become satyrs, this transformation was irreversible. If she still wasn't accepted by Duque, she didn't dare to imagine what would happen to her when she returned. The queen had never been a truly benevolent ruler. "All right, you'll follow me." Chapter 1050. The girl's face revealed an expression of boundless joy. This was not an act, but a genuine expression of joy. Looking at the girl's eyes that were filled with confusion, uneasiness, and fear, turned into the current peace and hope, Duke wondered if he had really fallen, turning his head and accepting a gift. "What's your name?" Duque asked. Unexpectedly, the girl did not answer him. Instead, she took 2 steps back and knelt down. "Master, please bestow me a name." "I'm asking you what's your name?" Duque was a little embarrassed. "No one treats me as a high elf anymore. My old name has already lost its meaning. So please bestow me a name, master." Duque asked a few times, but the girl still refused to answer. Duke was also discouraged. He could not bring anyone from this era with him, so he thought to himself, "All right, I'll just leave her with Tyron later. After all, everything I'm doing now is just a temporary measure to numb the enemy." "Celia." "Yes, from now on, you'll be called Celia Ubatilia." Duque's bad taste kicked in. The girl happily accepted. She placed her hands on her shoulders and bowed to Duque. "From now on, I'm only yours, Celia Ubatilia. Come here." "Yes." The shadowy Duque stretched out a black finger and gently slid it down from Celia's shoulder. As the girl trembled slightly, his fingertips slid across her collarbone, through the canyon, and landed near her navel. Even though she was embarrassed, the girl still quietly endured the slight uneasiness and fear in her heart. I didn't expect your aptitude to be top-notch." To be honest, Duque was quite surprised. He had thought that Queen Ashara would throw a sugar-coated bullet at him, and that she would at most be a charming vase. But upon inspection, he realized that this was a completely undeveloped piece of virgin land. Don't get the wrong idea. He was talking about the aptitude of the girl now called Celia. Although she was not very powerful now, her bones, muscles, and magic circuits that had yet to fully take shape all had top-notch potential. It was only a matter of time before she entered the realm of heroes. The rarest thing was that, like most of the Moon Guards, she cultivated both magic and martial arts. He leaned towards agility, but deep down, he was still an intelligent hero. Who was she? Another tragic character who was buried in the long river of history, unable to become a hero? Duque sighed in his heart. Speaking of which, the ancient era was also an era where heroes came forth in large numbers. Think about it, Dorima Sunstrider, who founded the Kuel Salis kingdom, was now an unremarkable existence among the elven nobles. His awkward radiant moon strength left him in a dilemma. Celia, who was praised by Duque, was slightly happy, but she didn't dare to be arrogant. "Master, please take pity on me." "Pity? As long as you pay your eternal loyalty to me, I will." Duque stood up and allowed her to follow behind him. "I'm not interested today. Take care of Tyron first." Celia's eyes flashed with unwillingness. She was sent by the Empress. Who would have thought that she would have to serve a captive, a slave-like existence? However, she adjusted her attitude very well. She was already dead in the past. Now, she had to hold on to Duque's thigh tightly. When Duque returned to his side palace, Tyrande was furious. She cursed in her heart, "Dukong, you bastard. You just took me last night, and now you're going out for a change?" She knew that she didn't love this man, but she couldn't help but get angry. Dukong had been implicated. Last night, during the intense battle, Duque had followed history and called himself Dukong to Tyrande. And now, unbeknownst to Dukong had been implicated. Whoosh! Winsage coffin couldn't hold on any longer. Duque had no idea, master of the infernal tunnel, she is. Tyrande pretended to be calm as she asked. "Celia, the dancer that Queen Azhara gave me. However, she's now my maid. From today onwards, she will serve you." Celia came up and bowed respectfully. Tyrande's eyes twitched, and she felt a sense of relief. It seems like this bastard still cares about my feelings. Tyrande. Endure. You have to endure. All of this was a personal sacrifice for the sake of destroying the Burning Legion. As long as they could destroy those demons, they would be able to avenge their comrades. Furthermore, this was something that even Alun had agreed to. This was the will of the goddess. A woman's thoughts were very subtle. In a situation like this, Tyrande unconsciously treated Duque as her greatest support. At the same time, her righteousness drove her to do all sorts of things that she didn't want to do. This was especially so when Duque brought back an elven girl who was as beautiful as her. This made Tyrande feel even more threatened. After a night of interaction, she had a deep understanding of the two sides of Duque. At this moment, Duque's will was undoubtedly good. However, in order to hide in the Burning Legion, he had no choice but to keep a large amount of dark energy in his body. Even if this was for the sake of a noble goal, she found that the darkness was still quietly devouring Duque's soul. This was a very bad sign. If Duque really fell, she would also be consigned to eternal damnation. What was more terrifying was that it could lead to the destruction of the world of Azeroth. Glancing at the elven girl called Celia, Tyrande shyly approached Duque and whispered into his ear, "I will try to like you during this period of time." Bastard. Duque smiled bitterly. Of course, during this period of time was referring to the Burning Legion's destruction. "Fine, you can do whatever you want." A pure white dress wrapped around Tyrande's well-built and voluptuous body. She did not twist her waist or stood around in a lotus position. Just the way Tyrande walked naturally to the center of the palace gave off a strange sense of holiness. She gently took off her boots, revealing a pair of long legs that could easily rival most human women in seconds before Duque's eyes. In the next moment, the solemn priestess aura disappeared. What was left was a never-before-seen charm that only a mature woman could have. It was a strange scene. Without any accompaniment, Tyrande danced elegantly and gracefully, her body moving up and down. She displayed her energy and passion to her heart's content, but the way she looked at Duque was incomparably complicated. Resentment, faint hatred, and a hint of submission. Unknowingly, the song ended. Duque had already carried Tyrande to the sofa and started groping her to his heart's content. Tyrande had no choice but to give in. She closed her eyes, but did not resist Duque's advances. At this moment, Gemini's voice suddenly came from the entrance of the palace. "Oh, infernal emissary, let me introduce you to a strong Kaldorii who has joined the army, Illidan Stormrage." When Tyrande's eyes met the familiar amber eyes, Tyrande felt as if the world was ending. Chapter 1051. Time seemed to have stopped. At that moment, Tyrande could no longer be described as sexy or seductive. On that priestess' face, there was confusion and pain, but the redness was the main theme. Tyrande gave in and allowed Duque to do as he pleased. Everyone could see the two black claws digging deep into her white dress from the entrance of the hall. This beautiful face that seemed to have sunk into depravity was simply captivating at this moment. It was so captivating that one wouldn't even want their own life. Of course, this was only for neutral males. For Illidan, who was deeply in love with Tyrande, this was like a bolt from the blue. All kinds of scenes from when he was young to now, the little things that happened unknowingly, and the warm and ambiguous scenes all appeared in front of him. Idiot. My future partner will definitely be an indomitable hero. Humph. I'm ignoring you. Fragments of Tyron's voice from thousands of years ago rang in his ears. The words of a child, a teenager, and a young man rang in Illidan's ears. In his trance, he even had the illusion that it was deafening. The shocking scene in front of him made him dizzy, and he could not open his eyes. What made him collapse the most was that he saw his own image on this human-shaped demon that was filled with dark energy. It was as if he saw himself, Illidan Stormrage, who was enjoying his beloved tyrant, and not the high-tier Void Lord Infernal Lord that the twins of Eridar had introduced to him with a wicked smile. For a moment, he almost wanted to pull out the two Warblades of Azzinoth on his back and kill this bastard who dared to defile the goddess of his heart. He really wanted to. He really wanted to. Fury erupted from the depths of his soul like a volcanic eruption. In an instant, it filled his limbs and bones, seeping into every blood vessel and every cell. He wanted to explode. The anger in his chest swelled to the point of explosion, and he was on the verge of exploding. On the other side, seeing the change in Illidan's expression, Duquesne knew that things were going to go south. In the original history, it was Illidan who sacrificed himself and pretended to defect to the enemy in exchange for that rare opportunity. That scene definitely did not include Tyron being robbed. Perhaps he had prepared himself mentally before coming here, or perhaps he was prepared to sell himself in exchange for Tyrant, who should still be under the protection of Elun. According to the script of history, with Sardra's appreciation, he might really be able to do it. Unfortunately, everything was a mess. Because of Duquesne's transmigration and the arrival of Gemini. For Illidan, the test was more than twice as difficult. The system elf clearly marked that Jaden's will had quietly arrived. He attached a very faint trace of his divine sense to auras and observed the side hall. Not only was he observing Illidan, but he was also observing Duque. Jaden thought that he had done it very secretly, but he could not escape the soul scan of the system elf. Duquesne knew that the biggest test had come. As long as he passed this test, he would be able to completely control the portal and work with Illidan to destroy the Burning Legion. If he couldn't pass, everything would be over. Suddenly, he couldn't help but laugh bitterly in his heart. Spying really wasn't that fun. Since ancient times, many undercover police officers had lost themselves after completing their undercover mission. Years of being behind the enemy lines had completely changed their habits. Other than waking up every morning and telling themselves, "I'm a soldier, not a thief," there was no one who could help them. In fact, after completing their mission, most undercover officers ended up in a miserable state. Being undercover for years was a small matter. Many of them were forced to become addicted to drugs. Even if they quit, they could no longer be police officers. The bitterness of being undercover. Who knew? Who knew? Duque looked up 90 degrees to the sky in his heart, and 2 streams of crocodile tears flowed down. F***CK. Don't blame me. If you want to blame someone, blame that bastard Nosdormu. He could have just thrown me into the Grey Valley in the future. I will definitely do my best to wave the flag and cheer for everyone in every battle. I will be the most outstanding hooligan and survive the ancient war. But he threw me into the twisting nether and almost killed me. I was just trying to protect myself. Yes. It's the demons who forced me. It's the goddess of fate who teased us. It's this shameless world that didn't give me a way out. At this moment, even Duque had no choice but to give up. Tyrande was thin-skinned after all. Her first reaction was to escape from reality. She couldn't accept that she had just decided to cooperate with Du Kong, and immediately her despicable behavior was seen by her childhood sweetheart who loved her deeply. It was a blasphemy against her hazy love. It was the collapse of her entire world. She screamed, "Don't look at me." She turned her head and struggled to get up from Duque's body. Duque made a decision. "Humph. You don't deserve to look at my woman. How domineering. Come on. Duque directly used his ultimate skill. A mind blast that was 100 times stronger than before was instantly released. The invisible, formless, and powerful psychic attack crossed 10 meters and landed on Illidan's body. Ah! Illidan, who had never seen such a strange attack, was caught off guard. His agility did not help him, and the instincts that he had trained for thousands of years did not help him. His strong, steel-like body was sent flying just like that. Crackle. He miserably rolled on the ground a dozen times before his dust-covered body stopped in the deep ravine he had created. Logically speaking, as an agility-type hero, he shouldn't be so weak. But, Mind Blast was never a simple dark element attack. Illidan saw every moment of his life in the spiritual illusion, from when he was born to when he died of old age. If it wasn't for the fact that the image in the illusion was exactly the same as when his body was twisted, he might have been a little more spirited. He used all his strength to try to prevent his world, mainly the real world, from falling into a state of chaos. But that was all. He wanted to get up and scream to the sky to express his pain and depression. But at this moment, he finally came to his senses and remembered his mission, yes. I came here to pretend to join them and then find a way to destroy the entire burning legion. Wasn't I already mentally prepared to endure everything? Why did I lose my composure when I saw Tyrant? I had to take back Tyrant. I had to endure for the future of my people. Illidan bit his lips until they bled, but he pretended to vomit blood. He knelt on the ground and shouted, "I'm so sorry. Great Lord Infernal Affairs. I shouldn't have peeked at your belongings. Please give me the heaviest punishment." Chapter 1052. The situation in front of him gave Duque a headache. He was terrified. He was terrified. Although he knew that Illidan was pretending, Illidan was still terrified. This was something that countless players could not do back then. He deserved to die, and he was unrepentant. This was the impression that most old players had of Illidan. Perhaps in the later versions, Illidan would be cleared. But until Duque transmigrated, Illidan was that miserable, pitiful, and hateful guy. Regardless of whether he was redeemed in the later versions, one thing was for sure. In the end, he never got Tyrant. Mysticism could not save the innocent, and money could not change one's fate. This was the case for black people like Illidan. Even mysticism could not save this African chief. Even if he went to the goddess of fate to buy money, he could not take away any of the cups and cutlery on his bitter coffee table of fate. So after thinking for a while, Duque decided to let Illidan be black all the way. Tyrant, whose power was sealed, did not have much strength. Although she struggled hard, Duque still grabbed her slender and flexible waist tightly, displaying the aura that an evil void lord should have. The surrounding air was quickly dyed black, and the surging and overbearing dark power instantly became the only main melody within a radius of a few hundred meters. Duque's power was so amazing that not only Illidan, but even the Eridar twins beside Duque were a little surprised. Huh? You're Illidan, right? Do you like Tyrant? Duque's lips curled into an extremely evil sneer. It was a sneer that would kill at the slightest disagreement. It was a sneer that looked down on all things and the gods. Illidan had killed 2 demon lords before, but he had never seen such an unfathomable and terrifying existence like Duque. Under this terrifying pressure that had materialized, bean-sized beads of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Tyrant, who was tightly held by Duque, was also frightened and did not dare to move anymore. She was afraid. It wasn't an act, it was real fear. She naturally knew about Duque's grand plan, but no one had promised her that for the sake of destroying the Burning Legion, they would not crush those who stood in the way of this grand plan, even if these were the childhood friends she valued the most. In order to save this world, both she and the moon goddess Elun were doing their best. Even if she prayed to Elun, Elun would definitely not support her and ruin this great plan of destruction in order to protect her childhood sweetheart. Tyrant felt as if she had fallen into an icy abyss. No. Infernal affairs. You. I beg you, don't hurt Illidan. He's my childhood friend. That's all. He didn't mean to offend you, he's already kneeling. Tyron trembled. Duque didn't want to be such an evil person. The problem was that Jaden was watching. If they jumped back to the loyal ministers now, not only would they all be finished, they wouldn't even be able to escape. In fact, he was crying in his heart. On the surface, Best Actor Duque's gaze was sharp. Oh, that's good. Didn't you swear to give your all to me? Prove it to me. Show him. This time, Tyron felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She looked at Illidan one last time and accepted her fate in despair. I'm doing this to save Kaldorii, save Azeroth. Forgive me, Illidan. Watching Tyron slowly offer her lips and allow the black figure to desecrate her body, Illidan's face was full of bitterness. His mouth tasted like sh*t. He didn't know why things had turned out this way, but the grievance and anger in his heart almost burned his brain. In the end, Illidan could only deeply bow his head. Duque was also very annoyed. For the first time in his life, he had become a great evil person. Even when he was unwilling, he wished that director Nozdormu would suddenly jump out and yell for the camera to stop. Hey! What happened to the cut? What happened to the reshoot? Nozdormu, come out and die. I'm not going to act anymore. Duque had tears in his heart, but he had no choice but to continue acting. As if savoring the sweetness on his lips, he smacked his lips and laughed maniacally. Ha 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 ha. Do you see this? Illidan's storm rage. This is power. Only power is everything. As long as you have power, you can obtain anything you want. For example, women. For example, reputation. For example, conquest. So what if you're not satisfied? So what if you're angry? You want your lover back? You can, beat me first. I don't dare. I don't dare. Illidan deeply bowed his head. Haha. You don't dare? You just don't dare to say it out loud, right? Duque laughed coldly. I really don't dare. Illidan's head was even lower, completely sticking to the rubble on the ground. His forehead hurt from laughing so hard that it hurt. Suddenly, all the pressure vanished into thin air. The cold smile on Duque's face did not change. It doesn't matter. In the face of absolute power, all lies and disobedience are just fleeting clouds. I don't care if you're sincerely convinced or not. I'll still say the same thing. If you have the power, take it yourself. If you don't, then kneel down and lick my boots. Maybe when I'm in a good mood and tired of playing with your tyrant, I'll give it to you. Illidan's body trembled. Was it shock? Anger? No one knew. Maybe it was both. At this time, Duque looked at the Eridar twins who had been watching the show. Enough of you. Don't try to test me in the future. I'm not as good-tempered as you think I am. Yes, sorry. The twins laughed sinisterly. Duque said, since he claimed to be here to join the Queen and serve our leader, then let's report this to His Majesty. Then let's report it to His Majesty Sargeras. Maybe His Majesty will like it. After all, he's the first person on this planet to join our side after the war. The twins nodded. Duque could clearly feel Illidan's resentment, but he didn't care. As long as Illidan could get the demon's soul, he didn't care if Illidan lived or died. Duque really didn't want to care about what would happen in 10,000 years. As long as he crippled the Burning Legion, he didn't care if there was another Illidan in 10,000 years. Pfft. You've angered me. Believe it or not, I'll really join the Burning Legion. With that, Duque brought Tyron back to the side hall. When Silegia obediently closed the door for Duque's actions suddenly became rough. No. What are you doing? Jaden was watching them from afar. Tyron knew that. She also knew her mission, but her feelings were still rejecting Duque. The next moment, she was shocked to see the darkness in Duque's eyes. It was obvious that if she continued to resist, the darkness might really devour Duque's rationality. Tyrant finally realized the danger. If she continued to provoke Duque's negative emotions, perhaps Duque would become a void lord before they could complete their plan. Sigh, Tyrant sighed softly. She used herself as a sacrifice and quietly devoured all the sharpness of Duque's godly sword. Chapter 1053. Tyrant Whisperwind was jolted awake from her nightmare. She had forgotten most of what had happened in the dream. What she could remember was that the moon goddess, Elun, had been embroiled in a terrible war. Her mount had been fatally wounded and flung her off its body. Her head had hit the ground heavily. Then, she had been captured by that terrifying Savis. She could still remember some terrifying scenes and sounds. A monster that looked like a goat had been eyeing her menacingly. A pair of furry hands with sharp claws had been grabbing onto her tightly. Then, she had woken up in shock. That pair of narrow and elegant silver eyes swept around the gorgeous side hall. She had seen this gorgeous room where she had been placed under house arrest countless times. The afternoon sun shone in from the west. This was supposed to be the elves' resting time. Her soft lips parted slightly, and she let out a soft sigh, lamenting her current situation. She shook her head. Her dark blue hair fluttered like waves, and a few strands of silver hair were rather conspicuous at this moment. She propped herself up from her prone position, and the silky blanket slid down her body. Suddenly seeing the battle scars on her beautiful body, she could not help but blush. She really wanted to ignore the black figure beside her, but unfortunately, the man who was sleeping soundly in the shadow state was her true master. This man who called himself Du Kong had always shown her the Burning Legion's battle reports without a care in the world. He had even publicly announced to the Eridar twins that this was part of his training to break her willpower. Tyrant wanted to deny that these battle reports were true, but the few times she tried to contact Elun under Du Kang's watch, she was met with silence. All Elun could give her was meaningless consolation and urging her to carry out her plan. Du Kang had even tried to contact Malfurion's soul, which had always been blocked. In the end, Malfurion had also made her believe in Du Kang. Tyrant was afraid that she would not be able to hold on any longer. She did not know when the so-called plan would succeed. She only knew that she was sinking step by step, even if it was in the name of justice and righteousness. The beautiful memories of her childhood and teenage years were fading away, and the members of the Elun sisterhood were beginning to fade from her mind. Her entire spiritual world was filled with this man's endless tricks and schemes. She had fought, cried, and begged for forgiveness. What scared her the most was that she was starting to get used to this role that she once thought was terrible. Even if she was tormented miserably, her mind would still be filled with that black figure when she turned around. If he left for a while, she would quickly miss him and look forward to his next visit. Unknowingly, 30 days had passed. Tyrant was shocked to discover that the luckiest thing between a man and a woman was to have the person you loved love you, while the luckier thing was to have someone who loved you but you did not love him. But now, she had fallen into a third way that she thought she would never accept, getting used to each other. In just a month, she had completely gotten used to his presence. It was as if she was eating and drinking. Have I fallen? Tyrant held her face in her hands. Suddenly, Duque's voice was heard, "No. This was just a nightmare. The dream will eventually wake up. However, whether what is unfolding before your eyes is a return to the ordinary daily life, or a reality that is even crueler than a nightmare, depends on our efforts." Tyrant felt a sudden surge of warmth. How ironic. Just as she was about to break down and become a toy without any sense of self, it was the fellow who had been forcing her that pulled her back. Tyrant bit her lip hard. She could not help but let her imagination run wild. If he really used this method to save the Cadores, how should I face him in the future? Bringing Tyrant with him, Duque walked towards the southernmost tower of Azhara's palace. The tower shone with the light of magical energy. Thanks to Duque's perfect adjustments, the High Elves did not have to work day and night like they did in history. Along the way, Tyrant saw the High Elves and the evil long-horned monsters taking turns to salute them on the way to the tower. The High Elves wore green hooded robes embroidered with intricate patterns, while the monsters' lower bodies resembled the bodies of goats. They used to be night elves, but now they belonged to the Burning Legion, yes. They were satyrs. In the huge hall at the top of the tower, the satyrs and the high elves struggled to maintain the magic within the hexagon formation. On top of the complicated magic formation that Duque had personally engraved, a ball of flame floated in the air. There was a ball of flame floating in midair. In the middle of the flame was a black hole. This black hole seemed to never disappear. The moment Duque brought Tyrande into the hall, she knew that she had entered the territory of the leader of the Burning Legion, Sargeras. There, the Lord of the Abyss, Manaroth, and Eridar Gemini had already arrived. Be it the Apocalypse guards around the hall, they all looked at the white-robed Tyrande with mocking eyes. These mocking gazes made Tyrande feel ashamed. The Gemini even gave Duque a thumbs up. Thanks to Duque's extremely pure spatial magic, Sargeras no longer had to forcefully descend his will. His power could pass through the huge portal at any time and appear in this world. The only flaw was that the portal was still not large and sturdy enough to allow Sargeras to pass through. "Can I come in?" A voice that made Tyrande's body tremble came from the entrance of the hall. Duque nodded. Manaroth immediately roared, "Come in." If not for Duque and Tyrande, Illidan would undoubtedly be the smallest. This time, Illidan was obviously prepared for anything. Even when he saw Duque, he could still greet him in a formal manner. However, no one knew what was going on in his amber eyes. Tyrande looked at Illidan, her mouth twitching, but she did not say anything. No one made things difficult for Illidan, because he was the main character today. The deep portal suddenly fluctuated, and in the next second, a mysterious power suddenly filled the hall. This mysterious power came from the distorted void in the distance. Sargeras's huge shadow suddenly filled the huge hall that was more than 30 meters tall. His booming voice rang out immediately after. "You're Illidan Stormrage, the one who proved your loyalty to the army, the one who could do what others could not." Illidan bowed his head deeply to show his respect. "That's me. As a mortal, you are very powerful." Sargeras spoke from another world. After a moment of silence, he said, "But your strength is worthless in my eyes," Illidan said coldly. "Perhaps I can make His Majesty descend upon Azeroth." Chapter 1054. The hall fell into silence once again. As the minutes passed, Manaroth became restless. He had never seen Sargeras so quiet. Sargeras finally opened his mouth. "Let's hear it." Illidan raised his left hand. An illusion of something appeared in his palm. The demons were a little disappointed. Illidan had only shown an ordinary golden disc. This traitorous mage went straight to the point. "This is my method, soul of the dragon." Every demon overlord's expression turned cold. This was especially so for Manaroth. He had personally witnessed its violence and felt its immense power. Relying on this divine weapon, the Dark Dragon King easily wiped out an entire elite demon army of tens of thousands of demons. Even the surrounding night elves that were twice the number were affected. The Death Wing, Nesario, stirred up chaos in this world, and even chased the other dragons away when they tried to stop him. It turned out that everything originated from this inconspicuous disc. Although His Majesty has never descended into this world, I'm sure you've seen its power. Illidan continued. You definitely want to take it for yourself. Yes. Sargeras was honest. But you never thought that it could help you come to this world, right? Illidan's voice was full of temptation. Sargeras didn't answer this time. Silence was the answer. Manaroth snorted. Illidan was no doubt shrewd, cunning, and selfish. The Burning Legion had long coveted this artifact, but it had always been in the hands of the Black Dragon King. When the demons could finally gather their strength to hunt down this fallen dragon aspect, they missed the opportunity because they were busy dealing with Illidan's kin. Infernal portal, what do you think? The leader of the Burning Legion suddenly turned to ask Duque. Your understanding of teleportation magic surpasses all the warlocks in the Legion. Duque bowed humbly. There's no doubt that it has the power to open a portal. If it's ours, in less than a second, Duque changed the topic. He stared at Illidan maliciously and said in a serious tone, but if the power of the dragon's soul is too great and not controlled well, it may blow up the portal and even the entire well of eternity. This second was so long that Tyrant and Illidan felt like they had been tortured for a century. Illidan was terrified. How could his crazy plan be seen through by this terrifying lord who stole his lover? Tyrant fell into despair. Du Kong. Have you really fallen? You're actually so considerate of the Burning Legion. It was as if Tyrant could foresee her hopeless future. Watching his compatriots being annihilated, watching his beloved forest being burned to the ground, no, not just the forest, perhaps the entire planet Azeroth would be destroyed. Almost as soon as Duque finished speaking, the Eridar twins and even Sardras nodded slightly. Manaroth couldn't wait to laugh. He was looking forward to Sardras punishing Illidan, because this skinny elf was obviously up to no good. Just as everything was about to be decided, Duque changed the topic again. Of course. If that dragon's soul is really that powerful, I strongly suggest that we upgrade the usage of this thing. Upgrade? Sardras was surprised. Duque raised his two fists. A one-way portal will never be stable enough. The more powerful the being, the more power is needed to pass through the portal. My lord, think about it. If only Azeroth has the power of the Well of Eternity and the dragon's soul, and the Twisted Nether has nothing, would it be balanced? Your suggestion is, it's best if the type of magic on both sides of the portal is the same. Since Azeroth needs the Well of Eternity and the power of the dragon's soul, then we can build a bigger and better portal in the Twisted Nether to correspond with it. If we succeed, the Burning Legion will invade other planets in the future, and that new portal will also be useful. When Duque said this, the eyes of all the demons lit up. Duke continued, before we open the largest portal, we can try to see if we can bring the giant dragon's soul through the portal, or we can directly transfer part of the giant dragon's soul's power to the warped void portal. Duke began to narrate the plan he had come up with on the spot. All the demon lords, including Sardras, were mesmerized by the story. Why? That's right. As early as 10,000 years ago, the Burning Legion already had interstellar battleships. Doesn't it sound very classy? It felt like using a laser weapon to beat a primitive man with a stone axe. Was it a one-sided beating? That was wrong. The Burning Legion was actually a bunch of idiots who only knew how to use a small portion of the functions of the interstellar battleships. Duque secretly asked, and it turned out that those interstellar battleships were actually stolen by Sardras from the Pantheon. Unfortunately, Sardras's original body was full of combat talent, and had no talent in science and technology at all. As a result, a large number of high-tech battleships were used as landing ships. The most common way for the Burning Legion to use interstellar battleships was to directly aim the bow of the battleship at the ground, stick it into the earth like a fallen tree, and use the battleship as a landing ship while blasting the Earth's crust. Or, in an extremely tasteless manner, they opened the portal of the battleship and used it as a landing portal after landing. Then, nothing. The fools of the present had not figured out how to use the demonic cannons that ruled the Azeroth 10,000 years later. Well, Sardras was illiterate. Naturally, it made the demons below miserable. Jaden was extremely smart, but he was a schemer, not an inventor, and definitely not a time traveler. He didn't have the ability to invent a whole set of scientific theories from scratch, especially physics and space theory. After all, this group of guys was too violent, and didn't want to improve. They would kill all creatures of the opposite sex at the drop of a hat. Where would there be so many scientists to study and figure out how to use interstellar battleships? The upper and middle levels were like this, and the guys below were not much better. In the end, the entire Burning Legion became an amusing amalgamation of both high technology and primitive abilities. Now there was Duque, the cultured, proven capable and loyal great hoodwinker who said to them, "I'm well read, I won't lie to you." From top to bottom, they all believed him and unanimously approved Duque's, Mjolnir, portal plan. After the discussion, Sargeras turned to Illidan. Well, how are you going to offer me the soul of the dragon? Chapter 1055. Illidan mysteriously took out a black scale. The scale exuded a violent aura, and everyone immediately thought of the cunning black dragon king. I can easily find Nisario. Illidan was extremely determined. Sargeras seemed very happy. All right. You will be rewarded as a reward for your loyalty to me. However, this will require you to pay a small price. Illidan looked up. For the first time, a trace of unease flashed across his slender face. My lord Sargeras, it is already my honor to have you personally come to Azeroth. I don't need anyone to help me, is that so? But I insist. Sargeras let out a mocking laugh, displaying the temperamental nature of a demon king. Suddenly, two dark green flames shot out of the portal with a whoosh. The flames were so bright, it was as if two suns had shot out of the darkness at the same time. When Duque turned his head, he used a shadow to block Tyron's eyes. The Void Dukes also dodged or blocked the attack. Only Illidan had nowhere to run. He couldn't dodge Sargeras' spell at all. The flames leaped into his eyes. His eyeballs, one of the weakest organs in the body, suddenly felt a terrible burning sensation. Ah, no, Illidan screamed in pain. His scream spread throughout the hall and even outside the huge palace. There was no longer any trace of arrogance left on his face, only pain, extreme pain, as if his soul was being burned to ashes. Tyron didn't dare to look. She trembled in fear and desperately covered her mouth, subconsciously looking for comfort. She threw herself onto Duque's back. She thought she would hate this action, but she didn't. Unfortunately, she didn't. She hid behind Duque like a pair of lovers. If Illidan still had the luxury of time, he would be furious. Unfortunately, he didn't have the time to care about others. Everyone in the hall watched in surprise as the flames in Illidan's eyes burned brighter and brighter. Sargeras' terrible power pulled on Illidan, forcing him to be tied to a cross and tortured. He opened his arms, his feet off the ground, and his whole body was pulled into the air and bent backward. It was as if in the next moment, this incomparably famous hero would be broken like a matchstick. Illidan's eyeballs were burned to ashes in the first instant, but the flames did not extinguish. The flames fueled by evil magic continued to burn into his eye sockets. When the raging flames burned away the last trace of blood and flesh in the eye sockets, the flames suddenly extinguished. Illidan collapsed on the solid stone floor like a dead dog. Even though he could still feel the lingering pain in his nerves, he was still in so much pain that he wished he was dead. All of his arrogant expression had disappeared. At this time, Sargeras' voice sounded again. My loyal servant, Illidan obediently lifted his head. His eyes had already disappeared, leaving only two empty eye sockets on his face. Only a few wisps of green smoke lingered in the eye sockets like ghosts, neither slowly disappearing nor becoming fiercer. From now on, your vision is now my vision, Night Elf. The infernal seer doesn't trust you, and I agree with him. But from now on, I think I can start to trust you. Illidan didn't make a sound. Obviously, the great pain made it impossible for him to maintain his focus. But Duque could clearly feel Illidan's hatred. The hatred of stealing his lover. The hatred of destroying his eyes. No matter which one it was enough to make Duque's hatred in Illidan's heart forever. Sure enough, every big boss-level demon could be easily fooled. Even though Sargeras had begun to believe in Duque's plan, he still refused to hand over such an important matter to a certain existence. Provoking the hatred between the two would ensure that the two would never be of one mind. This was checks and balances. This was the Demon King's way of controlling his subordinates. Good scheme. Good plan. If Duque wasn't a veteran transmigrator who had transmigrated twice, he would probably be tricked when Illidan tricked the Burning Legion. As for Sargeras' precautions, Duque only wanted to say, haha. However, it was useless. Time passed day by day. There weren't many surprises. The only one that could be called an accident was the rebellion of Das Rima Sunstrider. This grandfather of Kale, that was very smart. He noticed that when Sardra's could easily descend, the Burning Legion's attitude towards the High Elves didn't change. The last batch of demonic crystals was just a personal gift from a high-grade lord. This obviously meant that the Burning Legion had never really valued the High Elves. Das Rima hated the disgusting appearance of satyrs. As a true noble, a wise man who was good at thinking, he began to realize that what Queen Azhara said should be an empty promise. He had wanted to leave Azhara's camp for a long time, but he didn't have a good proof of allegiance until he, accidentally, found the soul of the demigod Cenarius's eldest disciple imprisoned in a small soul crystal. And that was the side hall where Duque lived. Recently, Duque was busy with the mysterious Mjolnir project. He and the Gemini rarely returned to the side hall. The eldest disciple of Cenarius and the high priestess of the moon goddess. This will be a very good gift. Das Rima thought and did so. In the end, the founding ancestor of the Sunstrider almost lost his life in the city of Azhara. The dancer Seleka, whom he thought he could easily knock out, was unexpectedly strong. It took Das Rima a lot of effort to subdue her. He thought that since he had saved Tyrant in the name of righteousness, the high priestess of the moon god would immediately follow him. In the end, Tyrant screamed as she took out a spell's layer bow and shot at him, almost nailing him to the wall. The only lucky thing was that he still managed to get his hands on the soul crystal. He broke it immediately and released Malfurion. In the end, he activated the teleportation before the demon guards arrived. Yes. It was a teleportation that took up to 10 seconds to cast. He found that he couldn't understand what Tyrant was thinking. After he released Malfurion, Tyrant shrank into a corner of the side hall. She didn't attack him, nor did she follow him. With no other choice, Das Rima could only run away before the teleportation channel in Azhara was sealed. When Duque returned, Tyrant threw herself into Duque's arms and whispered, "Promise me, end this as soon as possible. I'm going crazy. No matter who succeeds, end it quickly." Duque said in a low voice, "Okay." Chapter 1056. At the Mount Hyjal defense line in the northwest of the continent, the Burning Legion launched a new wave of attacks. The night elves who were on the defensive needed sleep and food to replenish their energy, but this became their weakness. The demons didn't need this. They could fight day and night tirelessly until they died on the battlefield. They would only retreat and stop fighting when they were at an absolute disadvantage. Even if they retreated, they would quickly return and soak every inch of land in blood. This time, the demons realized that their opponent's strength had increased greatly. Now, the night elves were no longer fighting alone. They had more troops in the battle. The Taurans, dwarves, and other races were like charcoal in a snowstorm, greatly increasing the strength of the defending army. This was also the first time the Burning Legion had suffered a defeat. The demons retreated step by step, and they were less than a night's journey away from the destroyed Surama city. Although they had won many battles recently, Malfurion, who had returned to the allied army, couldn't be happy. This wasn't just because his home Surama had been destroyed beyond recognition by the various battles. His unease came from the new strength in his army. As the leader of the allied army, Distel Starry Eyes, an idiot who had climbed to the position of commander-in-chief after Ravenkay's death, was Malfurion's greatest source of worry. As someone who had experienced the first and second battle of the Dark Portal, the Battle of the Dalajan, the Battle of Mount Hyjal, and many other battles, Luo Ning couldn't help but sigh. Compared to Duque, Distel's commanding ability wasn't even a fraction of Duque's. Duque could combine different races, troops with different weapons, and even armies with different levels of technology into an orderly whole, unleashing the greatest power. Even the logistical supplies that most of the allied commanders didn't know how to do were organized. From killing the orcs, to defeating the Scourge army, to taking care of the Burning Legion's demons, the allied army really hadn't suffered any losses. However, the Night Elves didn't truly join forces with other races to fight alongside them. Distel arranged his soldiers to the left and center of the army, while the other races were arranged to the right. The different races rarely interacted and didn't affect each other at all. If this could still be considered an alliance, then such an alliance was destined to fail. Those demons would constantly replenish their strength and launch even more ferocious attacks, often aiming at the intersection of the various races with incomparable ruthlessness. The only bright spot was that this new alliance had a large number of powerhouses. Almost every time, they relied on their strength to turn the tide. Brock suddenly leapt up, his movements smooth and fluid. It didn't seem like something a bulky body like him should be able to do. The gray-haired orc brandished the two-handed greatsword that used to be the blade of natural disaster and was now called the blade of judgment as he charged into the enemy formation. Brock let out a wild roar and swung his greatsword, easily slicing 5 demon guards in half at the waist. With a kick, he pushed the still trembling body onto the back of the evil demon. Of course, the fiercer one was still Lord Ho. This number 1 orc warrior swung the blood howl, that was also famous at this point in time, carving out a path of blood. In an instant, 20 to 30 demons were sent flying. Some were dead, some were turned into spare parts, and some were on the verge of dying. It didn't matter if you were a small demon pawn or a low-ranked demon lord, none of them were a match for Lord Ho. Hellhound. 1 chop. Doomguard. 1 chop. Lord of the Abyss. And it was King Chop. Before Lord Ho's strength was exhausted, there was no demon that Lord Ho couldn't kill. Lord Ho was ferocious. The only problem was that Lord Ho's explosive fighting style consumed too much energy. Luo Ning had to get someone to pull Lord Ho back to rest once every hour. Thus, Lord Ho had a new nickname in the Alliance army, 1-hour God of War. With Malfurion's return, he naturally shouldered the heavy responsibility of recovering his mana. The group of heroes could unleash their full strength. The siblings, Maev's Shadow Song and Jared's Shadow Song, weaved through the enemy formation at high speed. Maev's crescent blade easily set off waves of blade whirlwind among the demons, sending flying knives to the enemy's vitals. As usual, Luo Ning used his powerful arcane magic to suppress the Eridar warlocks. However, the one who killed the most warlocks wasn't him, but the elusive Vanessa. With the support of her luxurious top-grade equipment that blinded everyone, Vanessa often used backstab from the back of a warlock, followed by a slice combo, and cut the warlock into minced meat. There was no need for her to use a 5-star, eviscerate, or other ultimate skill. It seemed inconspicuous, but when the results of the battle were tallied, Vanessa threw out a bunch of warlock staffs. Every big boss in the Alliance army was dumbfounded. Even though the demons fell one after another, new enemies kept surging in from behind. The Night Elves' battle line began to shrink, as if they had been hit by a hammer. They had been fighting the Burning Legion for a long time. Not a single one of them wasn't exhausted. Archimonde was too cunning. He had taken advantage of this weakness of the Night Elves. An Abyssal Lord shouted, "I am XX," before the battle started. Then, like a tank, it charged into the formation and started a massacre, until it was killed by Lord Howl or some other expert in the Alliance army. However, not long after, the portal opened again in the Alliance army's sight. An Abyssal Lord that looked exactly like the Lord that had just been killed laughed sinisterly and shouted, "I am XX back." Mortals couldn't possibly know that the souls of the killed demons returned to the twisting nether to be resurrected actually came at a high price. They only saw that they had terrifying enemies that could never be killed, and would resurrect immediately after being killed. So, when more and more ferocious demon warriors with long fangs entered the battlefield, the morale of the elves collapsed. If it wasn't for the demigods of Azeroth acting together, such as Cenarius' father, Malorn the White Stag, as well as the remaining 4 dragons suppressing the enemy's air force, the battle would have been over 1,000 miles away. No. We can't go on like this. Our military strength isn't infinite. Even if we gather the combat power of the entire planet, we will still be exhausted to death. This wasn't just the thought of Cenarius, but also the thought of all the big bosses. What should we do? Even Malorn smiled bitterly. Maybe we can blow up the Well of Eternity and cut off the demon's entrance, Malfurion suddenly said. How? Everyone's eyes lit up. Soul of the dragon. Malfurion spat out 4 words. But we can't find that traitor, Nesario. The red dragon queen gritted her teeth. At this moment, Ronan suddenly interrupted, no, maybe I can. What he took out was a black dragon scale that had crossed 10,000 years of time and space. Chapter 1057. When Ronan spoke, Alexstrasza wanted to say, we can't wait to catch him and tear him to pieces, but that black dragon is so well hidden that even our own dragons can't find him. However, when Ronan took out the dragon scale, the 4 dragon kings were speechless. Of course, they recognized that it was something from the dragon race. The 4 dragon kings recognized at a glance that it was definitely Nesario's scale, and not another black dragon's. At this time, the blue dragon king, Malygos, stared at Ronan with bloodshot eyes. The entire blue dragon race tried to protect me, but they were annihilated. Even my spouse, Sindagosa, died in battle. Even so, I couldn't hurt that traitor Nesario at all. I couldn't even tear off a scale from that bastard. How did you do it? Ronan was speechless. Was he going to tell Malygos at this time that it was his master, who killed Deathwing 10,000 years later, who asked him to bring it here? Facing Malygos, who had fallen into a berserk state, Malfurion suddenly took half a step forward, blocking the line of sight of the Blue Dragon King and Ronan. Get out of the way. It's none of your business here. Little elf. Malygos glared at him. Malfurion shook his head slowly. He suddenly remembered many things. What he thought about the most was still nothing, the mysterious Void Lord who claimed to be Dukong. To be fair, he was also angry because Dukong had taken what he loved. However, he was helpless. The situation of the war was already in danger. If he did not do anything, the fate of the entire world would be irreversible. Before he was rescued by Darima, Dukong personally told him that the key to turning the situation around was the soul of the giant dragon. He wanted him to find a way to reasonably let the soul of the giant dragon fall into the hands of his brother, Illidan. As for what that plan was, Dukong refused to say. Malfurion did not know what his brother's plan was either. Malfurion would never easily trust Dukong. He did not even dare to fully trust Roddick, who had made countless contributions but was extremely mysterious. After all, the humans on the Kalimdor continent were just a bunch of ignorant barbarians who didn't even have their own language. Whether it was Roddick or the mysterious female thief, they obviously came from a more civilized world that had a more systematic understanding and application of knowledge and power. Malfurion had made up his mind that he would study the dragon soul for a while before he decided to deal with it. In any case, the situation couldn't get any worse. Even without Sardra's arrival, the Allied army would be exhausted to death by the Archaran army. Taking a deep breath, Malfurion held his head high and looked at the sky. We actually have a top-secret plan, and many people have paid a price that even the dragons can't imagine for it. Am I right, Goddess Elun? That's right. The will of the moon goddess Elun descended. I believe in my child, she and he will not let me down. As a true god, the moon goddess Elun's words carried far more weight than those of the demigods present. Since even Elun was defending Malfurion and Ronan, although they didn't know what the plan was, and everyone's curiosity was about to explode, no one dared to interrogate the goddess if she didn't say anything. They could only bow in agreement. In the end, the Anti-Burning Legion allied army sent a small team consisting of Malfurion, Krasis, Ronan, and other mortal powerhouses to investigate Nesario's lair. While Nesario's body almost exploded from absorbing too much power, and he had no choice but to let the goblins inlay a large number of high-strength metal plates on his body to stabilize it, Malfurion successfully stole the dragon soul. No, it should be called the demon soul, now. He also discovered that the ancient gods who had once occupied planet Azeroth and plunged the entire planet into chaos and madness were the masterminds behind Nesario's betrayal. Enzos and the other ancient gods were only sealed deep underground when they were suppressed by the pantheon gods of creation. Unexpectedly, they also took the opportunity to stir up trouble. After Malfurion succeeded, he turned around and left on the spot, wanting to inform everyone of this shocking news as soon as possible. However, this very powerful team was ambushed. The combination of Illidan, Verosan, as Hara's guard captain, and the Eridar Gemini had successfully snatched the demon soul from Malfurion. While Malfurion was shocked, he also had the deepest fear of Dukong. This mysterious powerhouse had already planned everything. What could be more reassuring than snatching something from the hands of a mortal enemy? Malfurion was speechless for a long time as he looked at Illidan, who had fallen into a state of madness and had no idea that he was actually a pawn. After returning to Azhara city, Illidan saw the demon soul being held by the Gemini as they walked step by step towards the teleportation door at the top of the palace. Although he was expressionless, Illidan's heart was pounding. For the first time, he didn't want to hand the disc over to a demon. He knelt on the ground and looked up at the voluptuous and flirtatious Gemini. He gritted his teeth and said, "My lords, compared to you, I can use the magic in the masterpiece of the Black Dragon more freely. With the gift from my master, I now know it like the back of my hand." To strengthen his persuasion, Illidan lifted the hood over his eyes. The Eridar Gemini saw his eyes and couldn't help but frown. But who was the Gemini? Kill, Jaden's deputy, one of the most cunning existences among the demons, the Gemini smiled. "What you say makes sense, but it's meaningless. But our great Lord Sargeras is the true owner of the disc. Shouldn't he be the one to decide who uses the disc and strengthens the teleportation door here?" The Gemini's words made sense, and Illidan was actually speechless. Through the dark teleportation door at the top of the palace, the Demon King said loudly, "The existence that has the right to use this divine item can only be I." Even though he was even more unwilling, Illidan could only follow the other demon lords and bow deeply and kneel down. At the same time, in the distorted void, an incomparably huge rock the size of a moon floated there. This was one of Sargeras' palaces, and it was also the gathering place of the demon army that was prepared to follow Sargeras to teleport to Azeroth. There were thousands of levels in the huge three-dimensional fortress, and each level was at least 20 meters high. Almost every corner was filled with demons who were eager to fight. The total number of demons here was calculated in units of billions. Chapter 1058. This was a terrifying number. Unless a mortal stood tens of kilometers away, he wouldn't be able to see the end of this terrifying army even if he twisted his neck. Think about it. From top to bottom, from left to right, they were all huge, malevolent-looking demons. No matter how you looked, you couldn't see the end. How shocking was this? How terrifying was this? Back then, the Eridar Gemini had shown Tyron such a scene, which caused her to lose control of her heart. If Duque hadn't used his authority as a lord to intercept Tyrant, she might have already fallen into the hands of some extremely vile demon lord and become a broken slave, or even be tortured to death. Obviously, Sargeras didn't even need to come personally. As long as these demons all threw themselves into Azeroth, they would be overwhelmed by their absolute numbers, be it dragons or demigods. Beside the mountain-like Sargeras, there was a floating magic platform in the air. After the seemingly insignificant Duque did a series of operations, he bowed to Sargeras and said, "Your Majesty, everything is ready." What appeared in front of Sargeras were 12 huge artificial satellites, each with a diameter of 100 meters. These magical creations were created by all the Eridar warlocks in a short span of 2 weeks. They were far more complex than any Eridar warlock could imagine. Sargeras had secretly ordered the Eridar warlocks to keep an eye on Duque, but the warlocks soon gave up. Their level of magic was too primitive. Duque had only used a few common magic formulae from the later generations, along with a bunch of side magic circles that were supposed to increase stability, but were actually used to confuse the line of sight. He was able to fool the Eridar warlocks who were in charge of inspecting the magic circles. This is fixed point strengthening. Magic will weaken in the air, understand? It won't weaken. Why can't your shadow arrow hit the opposite planet directly, but only 30 or 40 yards? This is an automatic control circuit. Once the magic node runs out of magic, this light will light up. Then we will replenish the magic here. Is this a magic ballast that can stabilize the output of magic power? As an engineering student who had studied automation, strong and weak electricity, Duque used a whole set of physics and engineering knowledge that could not be applied to the field of magic to fool people. Every time he tried to fool someone, he would be an idiot. Many Eridar warlocks even ran over eagerly to become Duque's disciples. Just bluffing wasn't enough. The Burning Legion was the most simple and violent place, and all that mattered was the results. Duque's dimensional gate was indeed effective. When Duque said that he was ready, Sardras began to travel through the void and absorb mana from Azeroth's demon's soul. Even though it was slightly contaminated, the dragon aspect's power still originated from the creation titans of the pantheon. The power they used was completely different from the dark energy that destroyed life and extracted the power of the planet. This was a power that the Pantheon Temple had obtained after tens of thousands of years of traveling in the universe and modifying it countless times. It was the most suitable and widely used power for traveling in the universe. Usually, power would be greatly depleted after teleporting a short distance. But the power of Demon's Soul was different. Even if it traveled through the void for who knows how many light years, under the control of Sardra's will, most of the magic was still injected into the 12 satellites that Duque had built. Although Duque wanted to name the 12 satellites, Goddess of Twilight's Necklace, it was a pity that the domineering name, Mjolnir's Hammer, was more to Sardra's liking. According to Duque's bluff, this dimensional gate was the hammer in Sardra's hand, and he could smash it wherever he wanted in the future. The charging of the satellites that made up the dimensional gate began. The group of demons looked at the readings on the meter that Duque had personally built, and the percentage points rose one by one. After waiting for a full hour, the charging was completed. Duque said loudly, "It's done. Your Majesty." Opening Mjolnir's Hammer will allow your Majesty to reach Azeroth with less effort. But the last layer of the planetary shield will have to be handled by your Majesty yourself. Open the gate. Sardra's voice rumbled. After Duque recited a long and complicated incantation, the 12 satellites that looked like a necklace shone with a mysterious magical light. Soon, the light on the 12 satellites connected in a clockwise manner to form a complete circle, and then the circle drawn in the distorted void glowed with the unique light of the dimensional gate. Sardras could tell almost immediately that this extremely huge dimensional gate that could accommodate him was better and more stable than any of the Burning Legion's portals in the past. Ha ha ha. Infernal affairs. You did well. In the huge fireball, a few boxes that emitted powerful magic waves passed through the void and flew directly in front of Duque. That was Sardra's reward for Duque. Duque was like a hungry dog snatching shit. He rushed over and put away all the boxes without even looking at the surrounding demons. On the other side, in Azhara, Demon's Soul floated in the middle of the Well of Eternity, shining with a dazzling light. In the deep hole formed by Sardra's incantation, the power of the Demon's Soul and the Well of Eternity churned continuously, about to form a stable dimensional gate. The Demon King was in his terrifying world, preparing to enter this latest spoil of war. Soon, he would destroy all life in this world, and then he would destroy the next world with life. Apart from him, there were some special existences waiting expectantly. Their dreams were terrifying, and even more primitive than the dreams of the Demon King. They had waited for a long time to regain their freedom and take back what belonged to them. Every time Sardra strengthened the dimensional gate, they were one step closer to success. With the help of the Well of Eternity, the Demon's Soul, and the powerful power of the Demon King, they could open a window to freedom in the Eternal Prison. Near Sur Lama, the allied forces that sensed Sardra's arrival began to panic. On the ground, the demigods led by Malorn launched a fierce attack on the Burning Legion. At the same time, Archimonde also hoped to use a decisive victory as a gift for his master's arrival. As soon as the battle began, it directly entered the most brutal state. The wild boar demigod Igamagan slammed into two Abyss Lords, or sent them flying, or used his long teeth to pierce their bellies. But his huge size attracted even more firepower. Mother Shara's 6 evil scimitars slashed at him in succession, and the Doomsday Lord Kazak's shadow arrows bombarded him simultaneously. In the end, he couldn't hold on and died on the spot. Chapter 1059. This was true for demigods, not to mention the mortals. A large number of lives were consumed like ants. In this primitive and backward era, no one knew how many people had died except for the relatives and friends who were familiar with those who had sacrificed themselves. Perhaps the demigods of Azeroth could find a chance to revive in the distant future, but mortals were dead. The battlefield was filled with a tragic atmosphere. If not for the fact that the Burning Legion only wanted to kill and destroy, the morale of the mortals in the allied army would have collapsed. In the sky, the dragons chose to give it their all. No one can guarantee that the spy hidden in the Burning Legion, or Illidan's storm rage, will be able to close the portal. We can only trust ourselves. Give it your all. We will close the portal with our own power. Alexstrasza encouraged the 4 dragon aspects, as well as the dragon assault team, Krasis, Malfurion, Ronan, and the others. This was destined to be a charge filled with pain and despair. The sky of Azeroth was filled with dark clouds. Unfortunately, the dark clouds were formed by the Apocalypse guards that were hovering in the air. Archimonde had personally gone to deal with the strongest demigod, Malorn the White Stag. Those left behind in Azeroth were not weaklings either. For the army, Apocalypse Lord Mephistos roared. His huge claws fell from the sky, and the Apocalypse Guard army that was as dense as a swarm of locusts slammed into the Dragon Tribe's assault team like a huge wave. The 4 dragon aspects were undoubtedly the strongest in Azeroth. The strong bodies of the dragons, coupled with the power granted by the creation titans, made them very strong. However, the betrayal of the Wings of Death had extracted part of their souls and their power cores. Even Alexstrasza, who used life as her power core, was only left with less than 40% of her power from her peak. Facing the siege of dozens of void dukes of various sizes in the sky above Azhara City, even someone as powerful as them fell into a desperate and bitter battle. They could not even get close to the outer city walls of Azeroth. A single dragon breath could kill more than a dozen large Apocalypse guards, but half a second later, more demons filled up the gap. They did not have the time to catch their breath at all. Giant dragons relied on their claws, mouth, wings, and tail the most. When Malfurion landed, he summoned a net of vines below them. Hardly had the experts been caught and the momentum of their fall slowed down when Azhara's counterattack arrived. Countless demon guards and hellhounds swarmed out of the city gate. On the tall city wall, the high elf mages and Eridar warlocks lined up neatly in 3 rows, showering the heroes with spells of all colors. Follow me. Malfurion led the heroes into an enormous sewer that could accommodate 2 carriages at the same time. In the sewers that were not submerged, there was knee-deep black blood and a large amount of corpses emitting an unbearable stench. After Malfurion opened the gigantic alloy fence that had been enhanced by magic with a special secret technique, they had to endure the stench while they continued to charge toward the forbidden palace of Azhara. But soon, they were also blocked by the flood of demons that surged into the sewers. At this moment, in the tower next to the Well of Eternity in the center of Azhara, a bone-chilling roar suddenly came from the portal that Sargers used. Even if they could not see it, anyone with the slightest magical sense could feel a terrifying storm brewing in the Well of Eternity. Obviously, that was the Burning Legion's unique demonic storm. Sargeras is about to arrive? Is everything over? Unable to hold it in any longer, Ronan directly used Arcane Impact, and broke through the sewers that they had been proud of as a barrier. The heroes charged toward the ground in a suicidal manner and rushed toward the inner city. Suddenly, an earth-shattering roar came from the sky, even louder than the loud noises on the battlefield. Deathwing rushed in and descended from the stormy clouds in the sky. He charged straight toward the demon's soul that was floating above the Well of Eternity. Mine. That's mine. You despicable thieves. No one is qualified to take it away from my claws. Deathwing obviously fell into a state of madness as he charged madly toward the demon's soul. Although Krasus and the others were full of anger and wanted to protect Deathwing who had betrayed the dragons, in such a situation, they had to shout in their hearts, "Well done." The Burning Legion was powerful, so the demon lords never cared whether their enemies were one or a group. Anyway, they were all guys that had to be dealt with. Only the most evil and powerful races that thirsted for destruction and destruction like them were qualified to join the Legion. Since they dared to steal from Nesario, they dared to face the revenge of the Black Dragon King. Balnazar, Malganis, Khazroga, and Croesus, the four-winged demon lords, flew into the air. However, the two Dreadlords and the two Doomsday Lords were only in the air just in case. Boom! A huge three-dimensional protective magic circle suddenly appeared in the void, and an evil yellow-green light bloomed, bouncing Deathwing away. Not only was it bounced away, but it also caused considerable counterattack damage. No, the Black Dragon once again rushed toward the magic circle that could not be passed through. His body continued to burst into flames because of his excessive strength, causing his body to crack. He had to use the armor made by the goblins to maintain his body, but now the counterattack of the magic circle had triggered his injuries. Obviously, the armor had not completely sealed the cracks on his body. His eyes were wide open, and he rushed toward the demon's soul with anger. He was so fast that Malfurion was dumbfounded. This time, there was a change in the magic circle. A cluster of green light that illuminated the entire world enveloped the entire black giant shadow. Nesario was tricked and directly suffered a big blow. He screamed and somersaulted at least 5 times in the air. Even the 4 demon lords who had been waiting at the side flew over together, ready to take advantage of the situation. At this moment, an accident happened. Deathwing's dragon blood sprayed on the ground. This was originally an inconspicuous thing. Obviously, the Burning Legion did not expect Nesario's dragon blood to be extremely corrosive. Unfortunately, the black dragon blood was poured on 2 of the 6 magic circle nodes, directly melting the Eridar wizard on the node into a pool of flesh and blood. The magic circle collapsed immediately. There was a big explosion. After a series of tremors, the existences of different factions were shocked to see a seemingly slender blue-purple palm grabbing the small demon's soul disc. That was blind, Illidan's storm rage. Chapter 1060. A few hours ago. It was a terrifying day, a dark day where the sun and moon couldn't be seen. Ever since Illidan suggested that he would give Sardras the demon's soul, Tyrant hadn't been able to sleep. The few times she did, she would take a short nap out of exhaustion. On rare occasions, when she learned that Sardras was about to obtain the demon's soul, she fell asleep. Unfortunately, she had a nightmare about the destruction of the world. When she woke up, she sensed a man's aura beside her. "Malfurion, are you here to save me? Or is it you, Illidan?" The prayers of the beauty were destined to go unanswered. Tyrant opened her eyes after passing through the hazy fog, only to see Duke. To her surprise, it wasn't Duke in his shadow form, but a completely normal Duke. Tyrant was shocked. If not for the familiar dark energy around him, she would have thought that he was a different person. Duque pulled Tyrant up and held her by the waist domineeringly. But it was this rough movement that gave Tyrant a sense of security from the familiar touch on her waist. It really was him. Dukong could actually be considered as a handsome man. No normal woman would like to be wantonly possessed by a pitch-black humanoid creature. It was a terrible experience that challenged the limits of a woman's acceptance. From the initial anger and resistance, to numbness and acceptance, to the current acceptance, to the pleasant surprise after losing hope, Tyrant suddenly realized that happiness could be very simple sometimes. Duque smiled faintly. "Tyrant, thank you for your hard work. Today is the day that will decide our fate. I hope that you can come with me and witness the results of our hard work together in this period of time. This proves that all of our grievances and patience have paid off. This is not the will of the goddess. It is purely us." Tyrant's mouth twitched, and the muscles on her face twitched slightly. Her exquisite and holy face seemed to be telling Duque that she wanted to be happy, but was also afraid that she would be even more disappointed and hopeless later. It was this incomparably contradictory feeling that made her speechless for a long time. Tyrant was at a loss for words. Come on. Duque did not explain further and entered the shadow form again. Just like that, he led Tyrant through various corridors and doors. The high elves and demons they met on the way all bowed respectfully to them. In their eyes, Duque was a rare, powerful, and intelligent technology-type lord in the army. She was different from those lords who only knew how to fight and kill. She was also different from those demonesses who only knew how to scheme but didn't have high combat power. For the time being, this infernal lord was irreplaceable in the army. Thus, even though they considered Tyrant to be the slave of the infernal lord, they didn't dare to slight her in the slightest. After arriving in the void, Tyrant saw Sardra's gigantic and terrifying true form. She also saw Duke open a huge portal and teleport Sardras to the space barrier of planet Azeroth in one breath. Even now, Tyrant still didn't understand what Duque was trying to do. Wasn't Duque still helping Sardras descend? When Sardra's mountain-like body disappeared through the void portal, Tyrant could clearly hear the cheers of the Eridar warlocks in Duque's control center. The demons were roaring, singing, and celebrating the fact that they were about to conquer and destroy a new planet. All right, you can all leave. I want to celebrate with my baby. Duque spoke in the Eridar language, which Tyrant couldn't understand. However, before the male Eridar demons left, they gave Tyrant an "we understand" expression. Tyrant's face heated up. Filled with a sci-fi feel, the metallic hall that could accommodate 100 people instantly became empty. None of the Eridar demons felt that there was anything wrong with Duque's order. Because Duque had already proven his loyalty to the army and had completed his mission well. The status that Duque enjoyed now was a matter of course. Tyrant braced herself and walked over to Duque's side. She knew that she couldn't defy Duque or Duque's divine sword. He wanted, at that moment, Duque gently hugged Tyrant and whispered into her long ear, "Now, it's time to witness a miracle. We have to conserve our energy, because it's going to be dangerous." Duque snapped his fingers, and the huge screen in the hall projected a real-time image of Azhara's surroundings. Tyrant saw the battle between the demigods of Azeroth and the main force of the Burning Legion. She saw the demigod, Malorn the White Stag, appear. As the guardian of nature, Malorn was known as the most powerful creature that walked on Kalimdor. He was one of the strongest creatures on Azeroth, just like the Dragon King. Guardian of the Way, Holy Spirit who protects all, Great Ancient Guardian. More than 10 titles and titles fully reflected Malorn's greatness. In the image, Tyrant was shocked to see that Malorn had easily flattened an entire elite demon army of the Burning Legion in order to save his injured son, Cenarius. Archimonde had no choice but to appear to prevent the entire army from being destroyed by Malorn. The duel between the two powerhouses made Tyrant think of phrases like, a duel between the strongest of two worlds. After the earth-shattering battle, Malorn, who had already been seriously injured in the previous battle against a large number of demons, was defeated by Archimonde the Corrupted. Although he had been evenly matched with the Demon Lord, Archimonde broke his neck. Archimonde won by a narrow margin. Ah! Tyrant cried in horror. Because the one who died was the spouse of the goddess she believed in, Duque could only comfort her, "Don't worry, demigods can be revived. It just takes a little longer." Then, the image moved to the vicinity of Azhara, and Tyrant saw the allied army's surprise attack turn into a bitter battle. She saw Nesario's chaos and failure. In the end, the center of the image locked onto Illidan, who had obtained Demon's Soul. Illidan. No one knew whether Illidan had aimed for this opportunity long ago, or if he had just appeared there by accident. All they knew was that because of the magic circle's explosion, Demon's Soul had been blown away. Now, within 100 meters of Illidan, there was nothing that could stop him. If Illidan wanted to do something to the platinum-shaped Demon's Soul, now was the best time to do so. "Brother?" 100 meters away, Malfurion exclaimed in shock. Chapter 1061. For thousands of years, Malfurion rarely used this title to refer to his biological brother Illidan. At that moment, he wished that his brother was still the hero who fought for his people. He was not disappointed. Because Illidan shouted in front of everyone, "Tyrant! Do you see this? I'm about to become the hero of Azeroth. Wait for me. I will rescue you from the clutches of that infernal underworld demon." Yes. He was going to become the hero of Azeroth, not the hero of the Burning Legion. When he said this, it formed a huge contrast with his eyes that had been destroyed by Sardra's blessing, and the evil Legion runes that covered his shoulders. Great! What jumped out of Malfurion's mouth was exactly such a delightful word. For a moment, Tyrant cheered in her heart, even though she had always disliked Illidan's stubbornness. Illidan was a stubborn maniac who desperately wanted to prove himself. When he wanted to study under the demigod Cenarius, Cenarius found out that he could not calm down and learn the way of nature, so he rejected him. Feeling humiliated, Illidan immediately turned around and joined the Moon Guards. He used his identity as a Moon Guard to expose and prove the Queen's conspiracy. After the leader of the Moon Guards, Latuzius, died in battle, he took over the leadership of the Moon Guards. However, Illidan was still too radical. His mana burn often burned his fellow Moon Guards to death, regardless of friend or foe. This caused him to offend many of his comrades. Unexpectedly, in order to win, he would act like Dukong. On the surface, he would side with the Burning Legion, but in the end, he would find a way to fight back. Tyrande was happy for Illidan. At least her childhood friend had not truly fallen. Unfortunately, Tyrande's happiness did not last for more than a second, because she immediately realized that Duque was too calm. That strange calmness was as if he was waiting to see Illidan make a fool of himself. Duque's behavior was like a bucket of cold water poured over Tyrande's head. In fact, Duque did not want to hurt Tyrande's feelings. He even hoped that Illidan would reconcile with Malfurion on the spot like he did in history. He wanted Illidan to cast the demon's soul, and send the demons of the Burning Legion back home. However, dreams were always beautiful, but reality was always so painful. From the very beginning, Duque felt that something was definitely wrong when he returned to 10,000 years ago. With Nozdorma's violent and straightforward personality, he would never do something like throwing Duque into the ancient war to kill him. Therefore, Duque always tried his best to avoid fighting with all his strength. Sure enough, history books were meant to be torn. Right after Illidan's self-expressive, delusional speech, tragedy befell him. "You really are a spy." Sardra's, whose true body was still outside the space barrier, roared angrily. Since Sardra said the word "sure," then he must have a backup plan. The stone under Illidan's feet was suddenly blown away. Even though Illidan was a master of both magic and martial arts, and had amazing dodging abilities, he could not avoid this trap that he had prepared for a long time. An extremely complicated, circular magic circle with a diameter of 30 meters suddenly lit up under his feet and easily caught Illidan. Dozens of large and small demonic giant hands grabbed Illidan's hands and feet. They twisted his entire body backwards and lifted him high into the air. He. You're a lowly traitor. Do you really think that the demon's soul was accidentally blown to your side? I lied to you. Idiot. See, you've been exposed now, haven't you? One on the left and one on the right, holding the platinum disc from both sides. Of course, it was the Eridar twins. The figures of these two female demon overlords could be seen in almost every secret operation. On the side of Azeroth, almost everyone's heart fell to the bottom. Even Duque's heart skipped a beat. As expected, history had changed greatly. In a world where one traveled through time and time again, any small change in history could lead to the death of an important historical figure, and thus change history greatly. However, Duque did not move, even though Tyrande, who was in his arms, had begun to tremble. It was Duque's calmness that affected Tyrande. On the other side, Sardra's voice came again. Give me the demon's soul. I have no time to care about a little bug that is destined to be destroyed along with this world. Yes. Yes. The Gemini twins smiled. They were very happy. They had helped their master's master at a crucial time. After this, they would definitely be rewarded handsomely. They were already looking forward to what kind of reward they would get. Something shocking happened again. The demon's soul, which was supposed to fly back to the center of the Well of Eternity under Sardra's power, suddenly fell to the ground. It wasn't just the platinum disc. Even Illidan, who was in the air, and the Eridar twins, who were less than 30 steps away from the disc, knelt to the ground involuntarily. It was gravity. An unimaginable gravity. 2 times. 10 times. 50 times. In just a few seconds, with the platinum disc as the center, everything within a radius of 500 meters was surrounded and dominated by the arcane magic circle that shone with azure light from the deeper underground. A large magic circle that was obviously part of the forbidden palace of Azhara overpowered the Gemini's magic circle and controlled the entire scene. Even the magic that Sardra sent from the teleportation portal was forcibly dispersed by this even more domineering force. Who is it? Who's behind this? Suddenly, the ground at the center of the magic circle opened up. It was a relatively narrow circular area, with a radius of about 5 meters. An unexpected person appeared, Queen Azhara. She was as elegant as ever, and her appearance was perfect. Surrounded by a few personal guards and 2 maids, she slowly walked up the spiral staircase and stood still. Then, she raised her head and puffed out her chest. Facing the direction of Sardra's will, she said something that would make anyone's balls ache. Sardras, do you really want to marry me and make me the queen of the Burning Legion? Let me share your power and glory? Ha! Everyone who heard this was dumbfounded. Most of them only knew that it was Queen Azhara who single-handedly attracted the Burning Legion, but no one knew that the queen had such an idea all along. Different races. Different styles. She actually wants to date? Everyone's reaction was one word, dumbfounded. Chapter 1062. It sounded exaggerated, but when one thought about it carefully, it made sense. The stubborn High Elves attracted the Burning Legion in pursuit of greater power, and they called Sardras God and Creator over and over again. They longed for self-evolution, longed for more power, but what did they get in the end? Apart from the most fanatical ones who followed Sardras to become satyrs. The remaining High Elves were actually feeling uneasy and afraid. If it wasn't for Duque temporarily comforting them with the demonic crystals after Archimonde's arrival. Perhaps guys like Dethrima would have split up earlier. In the original history, Queen Azhara had always foolishly believed, or perhaps hypnotized herself, that as long as Sardras married her, everything would become perfect. In this way, she and her followers would be able to bear the consequences of the destruction of their country and territory. After all, if she became the mistress of the Burning Legion, she and the High Elves would obviously gain more. Unfortunately, this beautiful fantasy was mercilessly pierced by the cruel reality. None of the lords of the Burning Legion took the High Elves seriously. If it wasn't for Duque, the lords would even cruelly exploit them, making them work day and night to open the portal. In a sense, the relatively gentle Duque had become the last spiritual harbor of the Queen and the High Elves. It was a certain traitor with bad intentions who told the Queen the truth. The Legion would not look up to a weak race like the High Elves. Either they were more powerful than Eridar in magic, or they were comparable to the Lord of the Abyss in close combat. Since Sardras betrayed the Pantheon 15,000 years before this point in time, and formed the Burning Legion to dominate the universe, it had been 15,000 years of history, and all kinds of powerful creatures had found their place in the Legion. Basically, there was not much hope for promotion. Only people like Duque who fought his way out could be promoted to a higher position. Just by selling beauty and a planet, she wanted to become Sardra's wife. What a joke. Of course, Duque didn't tell the Queen directly. He leaked it to Celia when he was bored, like a slip of the tongue. Celia used to be the Empress's maid. She was here to bribe Duque and was also the Empress's spy. Duque was not worried that his words would not reach the queen's ears. Duque was not afraid that the Gemini would find out and tell on him. After 15,000 years of continuous victories, the entire army was filled with absolute arrogance. Even the Gemini believed that the moment Archimonde arrived, the outcome had been decided. No one cared about the feelings of the high elves and treated them like pebbles that could be found on the side of the road. Only the highborn elves thought that they were gems or something. Because what Duque had revealed was the truth, Queen could no longer deceive herself. She chose to stand up. Even if she had to threaten or make a deal to force Sardras to marry her, she wanted to complete this political marriage. Of course, Duque was not the only one who made Queen Azhara step forward. Duque used the system elf scan to find a well-hidden cultist among the high elves. Hee. When it came to unscrupulous brainwashing, there was really no one better than that one. In the end, under the instigation of that one, Queen Azhara activated the inherent magic formation in the Forbidden Palace at such a perfect time and began to force Sardras to abdicate. Wishes were beautiful, but reality was cruel. Who was Sardras? Just because of a disagreement, he flipped over his boss's car and ran off to work alone. Then, as if he had too much on drugs, he casually killed hundreds of millions of creatures every few days. It seemed that such an existence would bow down to a mere elf. Then where would King Sardras put his face in the future? Moreover, Azhara was not a beautiful orc with sexy fangs in her mouth. Her chest was as big as a coconut, her waist as thick as a bucket, and her butt was as hard as a rock. No way. Of course not. President Sardras swore to die. His earth-shattering roar resounded throughout the world, even the thick black clouds in the sky were shaken away. What a joke. No one has ever threatened me, Lord of the Burning Legion. Demon King Sardras, not in the past, not now. Not in the future. Insignificant worm Azhara, are you ready to pay the price for offending me? Ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha, Azhara laughed. Her staccato laughter gradually became maniacal. Everyone who heard Azhara's laughter could feel the ominous and hopeless tone in her voice. Far away in the twisting nether, Tyrant couldn't help but hug Duque's waist tightly. On the other side, Azhara had indeed fallen into some kind of extreme hysteria. Ha ha ha. Sardras, for you, I am willing to go against the entire world. Now, all the gods and demigods in the heavens, as well as my people, want to tear me into pieces. You actually dare to tell me that I am threatening you by asking you to marry me. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Actually, President Sardras was also very bitter. Who knew that you, a nuisance queen, would marry him without even seeing him? The so-called sweetness, the so-called endless glory, were all things that you, Azhara, never agreed to. President Sardras was also furious. His main body was still outside the spatial barrier, and he angrily tore at the spatial barrier while cursing, Azhara. Just you wait, after I enter this world, the first thing I will destroy is you and your powerless and arrogant people. Sardras. I won't give you this chance. Azhara picked up the demon's soul that guard Captain Verosan had handed over and raised it high. The next moment, as Azhara chanted a mysterious and evil spell, everyone realized that something was wrong. This is... Malfurion's whole body trembled. This was not any language that existed in the world. Tracing back, it could be traced back to the even crazier Dark Empire period. That was the terrifying era when the Kalimdor continent was ruled by the believers of several ancient gods and elemental lords. Out of nowhere, a few consciousnesses descended. Yes. Yes. That's it. Well done. Azhara, you will receive a reward. This continent will be destroyed, we will be free, and a new order will be established on the ruins. You will become the unique queen of this planet. Malfurion's face turned green. Not good. It's the few ancient gods of En-Zoth. With the ancient gods in hand, it was definitely not a good thing. No one had thought that the crazy ancient gods would actually want to blow up Kalandor so that they could escape the cage left behind by the creation titans. Chapter 1063. Evil light bloomed in Queen Azhara's hands. Beside her were her most loyal servants. They were all fanatics who were willing to sacrifice themselves for the queen. Now, they were also kneeling on one knee, watching the queen's actions with fanaticism. Ha ha ha. Perish. Sardras, you ungrateful *tch. I won't give you what I can't have. Azhara's once elegant face was now twisted with madness. The demon's soul in her hands had the most intense reaction with the well of eternity that originally belonged to her. The black well water suddenly shot thousands of meters into the sky. Azhara city began to tremble. No, the entire Kalandor continent began to tremble as well. No, someone stop her. In the sky, the red dragon Queen Alexstrasza screamed in fear. In the void, the moon goddess Alun did not hesitate to use her divine power to attack Azhara's magic formation with the falling starlight. It was useless. The magic formation of Azhara had been in operation for countless centuries. With the support of the Well of Eternity, it could even withstand divine power, at least for a while. You'll regret this. *tch. In the distance, Sardras was frantically tearing at the spatial barrier. He was speeding up to enter this world. The teleportation gate in the south of Azhara's forbidden palace had opened slightly, and a hole the size of a fist had appeared. The Demon King's terrifying aura was spewing out from inside. If they left it alone, Sardras would be able to come out with time. At this moment, a slim female figure suddenly appeared behind Queen Azhara. Ah! Tyrande, who was watching the live broadcast in the twisting nether, exclaimed. Unexpectedly, Duque nibbled on Tyrande's earlobe and whispered, "She's my servant." Yes. A servant who seemed to have entered without permission had changed the entire situation. Queen Azhara would never have thought that someone would be able to sneak behind her even after she had sealed off the magic circle and isolated herself from the outside world. Your Majesty. The guard captain, Varlason, drew his sword decisively. He was half a step too slow. Vanessa snatched the demon's soul from Azhara's hand. She didn't attack Azhara directly because Duque had repeatedly told her that the queen's magical protective gear was terrifying. It was completely synchronized, and Azhara's magic circle actually had such a small gap. Everyone could see that Ronan was pressing something that looked like a pillar. The magic radiance spreading from his hand told everyone that this was his doing. Under the guidance of a certain traitor surnamed Du, Luo Ning effortlessly found the node of the magic formation that outsiders didn't know about and interfered with it. Vanessa threw Demon's Soul to Malfurion in the most glamorous way. Roddick. Alexstrasza, please lend me your strength. I might even have the chance to destroy the portal. Hurry, the chance is fleeting. Malfurion shouted. In the distance, the four dragon aspects, Luo Ning, Krasis, all the powerhouses of the allied army who could control their mana were offering their power. The colorful elemental light flew towards the tiny druid. At the same time, the lords of the Burning Legion also pounced over crazily, trying to stop Malfurion. All the powerhouses of the allied army, including Grom, pounced at the lords. They wanted to use their own bodies to stop the demon lord's interference. Everything was ready, and all they had to do was wait for Malfurion's final attack. If their last effort failed, none of them would survive. Malfurion's eyes flashed with the light of power. He directed everyone's mana towards the portal, where Sardras had already dug a huge hole big enough for a Lord of the Abyss to pass through. Malfurion firmly believed that Sardras, who was busy breaking the spatial barrier, didn't have the time to care about him. This made it possible to gather everyone's strength and take a risk. The mana of the powerhouses was too powerful, so powerful that Malfurion's mortal body couldn't withstand it at all. For a moment, Malfurion almost thought that his body was going to explode and die. However, it seemed to have sensed his will. This heaven and earth, this world, every creature, every plant began to lend their power to Malfurion. Silently, a pair of huge antlers grew out of Malfurion's head. It was the symbol of an envoy of nature, just like his master, the demigod Cenarius. They were extremely beautiful antlers. Malfurion felt that his mana had multiplied by who knew how many times in an instant. The enormous mana that had gathered in the demon's soul in his hand, which had almost crushed him and seemed as heavy as 1,000 pounds, was suddenly pushed forward. "Go back, Sargeras!" Malfurion roared, and an indescribably huge surge of mana shot towards Sargeras like lightning. Originally, they thought that Sargeras would be directly pushed back by this huge force. Everyone was wrong. The huge energy mass that was the size of a small mountain was actually blocked by Sargeras with one hand. Just the black gas on his hand was already stopping the energy mass from going any further. What was more terrifying was that the evil dark power started to envelop the energy mass. It wasn't hard to imagine that if Sargeras was given a few more seconds, all the efforts of the Azeroth heroes would be for nothing. No, almost everyone screamed in their hearts. Just then, a green figure fell into the portal like a meteor. The green figure was so inconspicuous that if they didn't pay attention, they would easily have missed it. In the next moment, everyone saw a shocking scene. Sargeras, the great demon, was actually injured, but only a small one. There was a shallow wound on his right leg. Krasis' sharp eyes recognized that it was caused by a large sword. It was Brock's blade of cataclysm. Every transmigrator's eyes were filled with bewilderment. None of this seemed to be possible. However, the magic sword that came from Archimonde's corpse 10,000 years in the future had really injured Sargeras. This top-grade greatsword had caused substantial damage and pain to Sargeras, who had an extremely high defense. Malfurion seized the opportunity when Sargeras was momentarily distracted. Explode! He easily detonated the energy. Finally, at the position of the portal, there was an earth-shattering explosion. No! Not just the portal. Even the branch of the Well of Eternity that was connected to the portal was affected. In less than half a second, even the entire Well of Eternity changed color. Not good. If this happens, not just the Well of Eternity, but the entire planet will explode. In the sky, Isera's face was pale. Chapter 1064. On Earth, in the era of the most serious confrontation, the most serious would be Old Sue and Old Me throwing bombs at each other, turning the Earth into a nuclear winter. In Azeroth, even if the Well of Eternity exploded, it would at most blow up the center of the ancient Kalimdor continent. But when the huge energy was mixed with the spatial barrier in the portal, it wasn't a simple matter of 1 + 1 = 2. Back then, the Titans of creation had put in a lot of effort to create this planet's spatial barrier. The spatial formation around Azeroth was not only a barrier that prohibited entry, but also a pillar that supported the planet's existence. It was like unscientifically taking the planet's core out of the atmosphere and wrapping it around the planet. If the planet's core was forcefully smashed from the outside, the planet would be finished. Of course, it wouldn't be so troublesome for the Burning Legion to just destroy the planet, but it would be much more troublesome to squeeze in and snatch the treasures inside. Malfurion detonated the huge ball of energy that crashed into the portal, causing the entrance of the huge vortex to tremble continuously. Then, it lost its internal strength, and the portal began to collapse. The edges of the portal that were burning collapsed one after another. As a fallen titan with supreme divine power, Sargeras still wanted to forcefully rebuild it with his powerful spatial magic. Unfortunately, it was too late. The situation had already gone out of control. Even with the power of the Titans, there were times when they couldn't do anything. Brock's sword had stunned Sargeras for a full second. It was that precious second that had stolen the victory of the Demon King. Despicable ant, under Sargeras's flames, the old orc, Brock, still smiling, was reduced to ashes. The long campaign had finally come to an end. The regret of not dying with his comrades had drawn a full stop on this ancient battlefield that had been 10,000 years since he was born. Brock, Grom cried, which was rare for him. Many of his comrades had died on the battlefield, but he didn't cry. Even when most believed that the tribe had perished, he didn't cry. But when this comrade whom he wasn't too familiar with, nor was he unfamiliar with, slashed out in order to save the world, the great Grom Inferno roared, and cried. His lacrimal glands seemed to have collapsed, allowing tears to gush out of his eyes and mix with the blood staining his face, turning his face into a mess. Unfortunately, not many beings had the time to notice Master Roar's feelings. Because the situation was still very critical, Sargeras was unwilling to accept the fate of failure. He forcefully smashed open a part of the unstable space barrier and stepped out of the portal that was about to collapse. He wanted to force his way into Azeroth and repair it at the same time. His desire caused the spatial structure of the planet to become even more unstable. Just as the explosion of the portal began to spread, the Demon King found himself stuck in the portal, unable to escape. He couldn't escape, and he couldn't retract his leg. He threw away the sword in his hand and punched the entrance with his fists, but to no avail. The passage between the two worlds rapidly shrunk until he was sandwiched tightly in the middle. Sargeras roared, his voice reverberating in everyone's hearts. I will not fail. Absolutely not. The portal kept shrinking, and Sargeras seemed to be shrinking as well. He tried his best to open the passage, and under his immense power, the inside of the portal started to catch fire, bursting out with an indescribably terrifying energy turbulence. At the same time, this also caused a terrifying tremor that affected the entire planet's crust. We have to do something. Nuzdormu roared. We have to push Sargeras out, or he'll bring us down with him. Alexstrasza was like a madman, forcefully taking on the big moves of the three demon lords, and rushed towards the portal. Unfortunately, she was still too far away. Is this the end? Malfurion was the most desperate. In order to stop Sargeras from entering this world, he was the one who had detonated that ball of energy. Who would have thought that this was considered doing bad things out of good intentions? If Sargeras came in, the planet would be destroyed. If the portal exploded, the planet would still be destroyed. After working so hard for so long, this was the result of despair. Who could take it? At this time, many demon lords stopped, and so did the heroes of the Azeroth Coalition army. Everyone stared in the direction of the portal with the greatest fear and despair. They were waiting for the situation to change. If it really exploded, then everything they had done would be for naught. No. Master hasn't done anything yet. Vanessa said. Yes. Master loves to do big things. Ronan replied. I don't want to admit it, but at a time like this, we can only rely on him. Even Krasis nodded. After spending so much time together, Malfurion knew very well that these mysterious powerhouses were all heroes with good hearts. They had the most noble sentiments and the most resolute will to fight. They could be said to be the most resolute and perfect comrades. The him they were talking about was naturally that nothing, who had helped Malfurion and imprisoned him. He was also the Dukong that Tyrant had mentioned later on. In the end, we still have to rely on that Dukong? Malfurion's mouth was full of bitterness. He thought of many things. He thought of the peaceful days in the past, and the time he had strolled in the lush garden with Tyrant. He couldn't help but think that his last hope had actually fallen on that mysterious Dukong. How laughable. So many mortals, so many powerhouses, even demigods and true gods, all wanted to break the shackles of fate and control it with their own power. But in the end, they could only rely on Dukong, who was hiding in the Burning Legion. Malfurion thought of the time when Tyrant cried and asked his trapped soul, "What should I do?" The helplessness of giving up on love still gnawed at his heart like a poisonous snake. Bastard. I don't care if you're willing or not. You've already taken away my most precious thing, and the fate of billions of lives on this planet is in your hands. Don't disappoint us. Otherwise, even if we die, we'll curse you with the fiercest power possible. Malfurion thought back to Duque's pitch-black appearance and tried to convince himself to trust this mysterious and unreliable fellow. It was rare that even Malfurion, the honest guy, let out such a cry. Not to mention other existences. Who was it? It didn't matter who it was. Who could save Azeroth? Come quickly. This world is going to be destroyed. In the twisting nether, Tyrande was so shocked that she couldn't speak. At this moment, Duque suddenly grabbed her hand and smiled. Did you know? The best singers are always the last to appear. Under the gaze of tens of thousands of people, as the Demon King roared and hit the wall with all his might, a huge shadow of a black figure suddenly appeared above the portal. It was Duque in his shadow form. Come back, Sargeras. The next moment, an irresistible suction force came from the other end of the portal and forcefully pulled Sargeras back into the portal. Chapter 1065. Master. Master? I knew it, bastard, couldn't you have shown up earlier? Vanessa, Ronan, Krasis, and Grom spoke in different tones, but they expressed the same meaning. The surrounding experts immediately realized who this black figure was. Could he be? Alexstrasza was stunned. I'm afraid so. Isra nodded lightly. According to the moon goddess Elun, these demigods all knew that there was a super spy in the allied army who had infiltrated the highest level of the Burning Legion. Although no one knew who this spy was, and no one knew what this spy could do. But in the end, at the most critical moment, the spy boss suddenly jumped out and set Sargeras up. This was really a big event that the allied army was happy to see. Sargeras used his sharp fingers to firmly grasp the unstable inner wall of the portal. Your infernal affairs? Impossible. President Sargeras' eyes widened. He couldn't believe that the person who single-handedly sent Archimonde to Azeroth, opened the portal to Azeroth for him, and did something that no Eridar warlock could do. A new Void Lord with a bright future would betray him at this time. Did the intelligence of the Titans drop after they fell? Idiot, you don't understand the meaning of the pseudonym of infernal affairs. Duque smirked. Illidan and Malfurion noticed that a few long strands of dark blue hair floated next to Duque's image. Was Tyrande beside him? The bitterness in the Stormwind brothers' mouths deepened. In the next second, Sargeras didn't disappoint the allied army. He roared and was forcibly sucked back. The portal that lost its support began to shrink rapidly. But this wasn't the end. The powerful spatial fluctuations caused by the big explosion just now showed no signs of subsiding. Just when everyone wanted Duque to do something, Duque didn't disappoint them. Things have gotten out of hand. Looks like Azeroth City can't be saved. Duque looked distressed. Even though Duque was talking about something terrifying, the faces of all the big shots of the allied forces were filled with unconcealable surprise. Previously, the planet could not even be saved. It could explode at any moment, and everyone would be wiped out. Now, they were only going to blow up Azhara. Is this for real? If this was the price they had to pay for this world-shaking battle, then wasn't this price too light? No one dared to say that Duque could or could not do it. Every big shot raised their heads and waited for Duque to make his move. In the distorted void, Duque turned around with a smile. Oh, I told you that I would let you witness a miracle. Tyrande still couldn't believe it. She felt like she was dreaming. How did the terrifying Sargeras get sucked back just like that? Dukong isn't lying to me, right? It couldn't be a fabricated illusion, right? If these were all illusions, then weren't these illusions a little too realistic? Tyrande suddenly realized that Duque was holding her hand and pressing a large blue button. Just now, Duque had pressed the leftmost button. This is the second button that will make the Burning Legion pay a heavy price. You've wronged yourself and sacrificed so much. Shouldn't you vent your anger now? Tyrande was completely dumbfounded. She subconsciously chose to believe Duque, and pressed the button with her trembling hand. In Azeroth, although the Demon King had been sucked back, which was an unbelievable result, the crisis was still there. Either the following explosion would destroy everything, or the portal would remain open, and the Burning Legion and Sargeras would still have a chance to enter Azeroth again. Just then, the intense explosion that seemed like it was about to spread to the entire world suddenly stopped. There was a sudden deathly silence in the air, as if the entire world had become silent. The wind stopped, and even the water from the well of eternity that had almost reached the sky fell back down. There was no longer any sound. This strange scene made all the big shots of the Allied forces look at each other. 3 seconds later, the roar of the wind resounded throughout the well of eternity, Azeroth, and even the entire Kalimdor continent. A seemingly chaotic gust of wind surged in the air. Even though it was turbulent, it had the power of a hurricane. Fortunately, Isra managed to dodge it in time. Like an apocalyptic storm, the wind blew violently. It was more violent than any hurricane that mortals had ever seen before. The giant dragons in the sky were caught off guard and were sent spinning in the air, flying around randomly, and even crashing into each other. Unexpectedly, they soon regained their balance. Only a few unlucky ones who collided with each other grimaced in pain, but this was nothing to the thick-skinned wyverns. More importantly, the wind just now seemed to have disappeared. The focus wasn't on the wyverns, but on the demons. The Doomsday Guards and all the flying demons couldn't escape this disaster. These winged demons couldn't control themselves in the air, and they couldn't do anything about the terrifying hurricane. A few demons crashed into each other, their skulls cracked and limbs broken. Many demons died just like that. But in the strong wind, their corpses didn't fall down. Instead, they spun rapidly on the surface of the well of eternity. It was as if a supergiant was drinking pearl milk tea, and these tragic demons were the so-called pearls. The next moment, the suction force suddenly increased tenfold, then 100-fold. But to the giant dragons, this violent hurricane was like a summer breeze. They didn't feel anything at all. To their enemies, it was hell. They were in a mess. Tens of thousands of Doomsday Guards spun in the air, until the last one was mercilessly sucked into the portal. The big shots of the Allied forces were dumbfounded. They never imagined that there was such a terrifying spell or some kind of device in the world, and that it was specifically used against demons. The demons that were still breathing wailed loudly, just like the screams of the weak creatures they had destroyed and slaughtered. But it was useless. They were like scraps of paper in a wild storm, unable to resist this terrifying storm. Not only the Air Force, but even the ferocious-looking demons on the ground were sucked into the portal from all directions. At first, it was the smaller ordinary demons like the Hellhounds, then the Demon Guards, and in the end, even the larger demons that weighed dozens of tons couldn't escape. The demons instantly rushed into the huge portal. In the eyes of others, their bodies began to distort and elongate like noodles. Finally, they became incomparably long, liquid-like things that were sucked into the portal. In the end, nothing could be seen. Chapter 1066. The terrifying suction force spread to the demon lord's body. Manarotha's movement started to slow down. He looked at an Eridar and realized that the same thing was happening to an Eridar warlock. The night elves didn't seem to be affected much, but their movements were getting slower and slower. What happened? He muttered to himself. Manarotha's tail hit the floor heavily, trying to resist this force. Just as he raised his hand that was holding the double-headed greatsword, his eyes suddenly widened. His scaly fur was now translucent. He could clearly see the muscles and bones in his body, and they didn't seem real anymore. Impossible, the Burning Legion's vanguard said in a booming voice. Absolutely impossible. A huge force pulled him up, and he felt like he was rising into the air like a balloon. Then, like a feather, he was sucked into the tornado-like crack in the portal. Near the city of Azhara, and even on the entire continent of ancient Kalimdor, every single soldier of the Allied army who was fighting a bloody battle was stunned to see this unbelievable scene in front of them. The demons that had been incomparably ferocious just a moment ago, wanting to tear apart everything in their way, were all sucked away. It was as if the enemies they had fought for months and sacrificed countless lives to resist were just a bunch of laughable illusions. Krasis, Malfurion, Alexstrasza, and even Elune, the goddess of the moon, who had sent down her divine will, asked the black figure standing above the crack in the huge portal. "What did you do?" "Me? Haha. I just changed the incantation that Zoth taught me, sucking away most of the creatures in Azeroth, and only sucking the demons into the twisting nether. Duque, who had just done something earth-shattering, seemed extremely calm. You will pay the price. I'll remember you. The will of an ancient god flashed before disappearing. Almost everyone's heart skipped a beat. As expected, these evil fellows never gave up. However, to be able to change the incantation of an ancient god, where did this Dukong come from? One had to know that in this era, there weren't many existences who understood the ancient god's incantation, unless they were evil cultists hiding in the dark. Speaking of which, this guy really doesn't have any psychological burden at all. First, he sold out the Burning Legion, then the ancient gods. He was so daring and reckless. I really don't know how to describe this crazy and outstanding spy. At this moment, the teleportation gate was slowly closing. Unfortunately, the well of eternity that had calmed down for a while began to boil again. Duque said, I'll leave this place to you. I need to work on the twisting nether. What are you doing? Isra asked loudly. Duque revealed the most mysterious and incomprehensible smile. It's rare for me to have such a powerful weapon. How can I vent my hatred if I don't get rid of the Burning Legion? Don't worry, after this, I guarantee that the Burning Legion will not be able to invade Azeroth on a large scale for at least 10,000 years. 10,000 years? What kind of joke was this? Being able to maintain peace for 100 years was already a miracle. Moreover, the main force of the Burning Legion had only been forcefully dragged away, not destroyed. What right did this Dukong have to say such big words? Unless, an idea that could not be any crazier began to emerge in the minds of all the experts. Could this guy be? They really wanted to imagine what Duque would do, but there was no time. A huge black light began to bloom on the Well of Eternity. A terrifying tremor that seemed to never stop spread in all directions along with the magic power of the Well of Eternity. Kaboom! With a loud noise, a huge crack at least 100 meters wide split the entire city of Azhara in half, and the huge crack was still showing signs of expanding. The powerful magic seal was still protecting the forbidden palace of Azhara, but no one knew how long it would last. Go! The giant dragons descended and rescued the heroes who had been fighting on the ground. Where's Tyrant? Tyrant hasn't returned yet. Illidan yelled at his brother. Malfurion's body trembled. I don't know, will he? The he was referring to was, of course, Duque. No one knew what Duque was going to do next. Sitting in the control room of the twisting nether, Duque gleefully tapped the beat and hummed an unknown tune. He sensed the situation outside and even had the mood to tease Tyrant. Tyrant was so scared that her heart almost jumped out of her chest. Even her body was trembling. Don't worry. This is a super long-distance interstellar teleportation. Even Sargeras, who was the first to come back, would need 5 minutes and 18 seconds. I also specially chose the slowest spatial tunnel for him. If I'm not wrong, he will come back with his subordinates. What if we're discovered by the demons here? Tyrant couldn't imagine how the hundreds of millions of demons here would react if they found out that she and Duque were doing this. It's fine. I've already secretly blocked all spatial communications here. I have enough time to do whatever I want. What was audacity? This was audacity to the extreme. Although every hero must have a big heart, but to have a big heart like Dooku, it was truly unheard of and unheard of. Tyrant felt a sense of excitement. It was a thrill that she had never felt in her thousands of years of life, from her childhood to her teenage years to her youth. Illidan was very good to her, and so was Malfurion. However, she had never felt such a taboo excitement from these two childhood friends. Ever since she was young, she had always followed the rules, listened to the sounds of nature, and followed the teachings of the goddess. She was the spokesperson of the goddess, the example of all that was good. She had never tried to play with the Burning Legion, who could destroy the entire world, in the palm of her hand. Walking on a tightrope on a mountain of blades. Dancing on the tip of a blade. Disco dancing at the gates of hell. There was nothing more exciting than this in the world. Her heart was racing, her adrenaline was pumping out adrenaline, and the endorphins in her brain were spreading joy. From the misery, grievance, and terror after being captured to the fact that the situation was about to turn around and they were about to successfully defend Azeroth and become a special existence beside the great hero of Azeroth, the complex emotions brought about by the ups and downs were indescribable. The more Tyron thought about it, the more excited she was, and the more afraid she was. Unknowingly, all her thoughts and concerns were placed on this strange man who had once rudely dominated her, gave her despair, and gave her the greatest hope. Ha! We're finally at the last step. Duque laughed. Chapter 1067. On this day, in the super void fortress of the Twisted Nether, the demons were discussing the battle situation while waiting in boredom, as if they were celebrating a festival. Haha. I'm going to kill to my heart's content this time. This was what the cruel Dread Guardian said. I'm lacking some fresh experimental materials. Remember to tell the idiots below not to kill all the natives. This was what the evil Eridar Warlock said. No one expected that just as everyone was looking forward to a grand and magnificent victory, there would suddenly be movement in the incomparably huge circular teleportation portal. There was no air in the void, and there was no medium for sound to travel, so there was no sound. However, this scene made every demon who witnessed this scene feel like they were hallucinating. There was a loud bang in their heads. That was an uncountable number of demons. They were all the lucky ones in the eyes of other demons, lucky enough to be the first to rush to planet Azeroth. Now, they were all back, in the form of corpses. Most of these strong demons could survive for a long time even if they were thrown into the airless void, into the terrifying polar regions, or in lava. Some demons did not even need air to survive, nor were they afraid of high temperatures and flames. Now, they were all reduced to dust. A hellhound's horn was pressed against the arm of a demon guard. The Abyssal Lord's belly button no longer had a shield-like waist plate hanging from it, but the skull of a female demon that looked like a specimen of Shivala. They were all torn to pieces and mixed into a ball, almost indistinguishable from each other. This is the Twisted Nether. A demon in the Void Fortress said the greatest fear in the hearts of the demons. Yes. Outside the Twisted Nether, no matter how many times they died, as long as their souls did not collapse, they could be resurrected countless times. However, dying in the Twisted Nether, like this kind of demon whose soul and body were sent back together, was dead. There was no possibility of resurrection. The huge teleportation portal formed by the 12 satellites as the fulcrum became a huge fountain, continuously spraying demon remains into the Twisted Nether. No one could estimate how many demons there were in this place. Obviously, this number was definitely in the hundreds of thousands. What happened? Kill Jaden, who was in charge of guarding and dispatching reinforcements, rushed over when he heard the news. As soon as he flew out of the Void Fortress, he saw a large piece of trash being spat out by the portal along with hundreds of larger pieces of trash. The Archerons and Void Dukes were different from ordinary demons. Although they were in a sorry state, they didn't suffer too much damage. Archimonde? Kil'jaeden's eyes lit up. He finally met someone he could talk to. What happened? If the low-level demons below died, then so be it. In any case, there were so many of them. It wouldn't hurt even if thousands of them died. But it was different for demon lords and Archimonde commanders. Even if he wasn't on good terms with Archerons, in terms of overall interests, Kil'jaeden was still in line with Archerons. When the magical Eridar language reached Archimonde's ears, he was still confused. I don't know either. I just fought on the front lines. There was a guy who looked like a white deer who was very powerful. It took me a lot of effort to barely defeat him. All of a sudden, I was pulled back. This is... At this time, Kil'jaeden, who had regained his senses, remembered that there was someone else he could ask about this situation. That was the high-tier Void Lord in charge of the portal. His thoughts were immediately interrupted, because Sargeras had actually returned. His huge body was almost forcibly squeezed out of the portal. The melted armor covered the fallen titan from his neck to his feet. Sargeraz's entire body exuded a black, violent magic. This magic was shockingly powerful. Just looking directly at it would be enough to stab one's eyes and cause pain. In the void control room, Tyrant endured the pain and bravely looked at Sargeraz's evil face. It was a face that was twisted and perfect. About 15,000 years ago, Sargeraz was still a handsome, almost perfect being. Through a lun, Tyrant learned that the race of this creature was the one who created this world. But now, this handsome face was filled with evil. His body was already dead, and his eyes were burning with flames. He was in an extremely chaotic state of emptiness. Sargeraz had sharp, poisonous fangs. He waved a long and thick tail behind him, and jagged scales protruded from the tip of the tail. His hands were curled with demonic claws, and he held an evil sword in one hand. Perhaps it was because of the explosion of the portal just now, only half of the sword was left. However, its serrated blade still looked very lethal. Infernal affairs. You traitor. You still have the guts to stay here? Sargeraz's roar set the tone for this strange turn of events. Kill Jaden and the Eridar twins who were floating in the air turned pale. If Infernal Affairs was really a traitor, then they would also be in trouble. How terrifying was the voice of the fallen titan. Even though they were at least 10,000 meters away, Duque and Tyrant could still feel the terrifying pressure. It was as if stars were crashing into them. If not for Duke blocking the attack for Tyrant with a wave of his power, Tyrant might have died on the spot, her organs exploding into smithereens. With a thought, the dark energy in Duque's body activated a small spell. Suddenly, an illusory projection of Sargeraz's size appeared in the void. Over 1 billion demons heard Duque's voice, which was formed by dark energy waves. Haha. Sargeraz, why don't you ask me why I'm still here instead of hiding like you think I am? Duque's calmness made the Burning Legion's triumvirate uneasy. This infernal affairs was too scary. He snuck in silently, and like the other lords, accepted the ultra-high purity of dark energy baptism, but kept his heart. He passed all the tests, and with his unparalleled spatial magic, he climbed to the top of the Burning Legion. Why hadn't he left yet? The answer was simple. He must have something up his sleeve. Haha. Let me tell you now, why did I name this portal, Mjolnir? Duque's face was dyed with black energy, and a smile that was terrifying even to a demon appeared. Chapter 1068. I don't care what you're up to. Everything is over. You can't betray the Legion just because you want to. Pay the heaviest price for your sins. Following Kill Jaden's domineering words, the image of something in Kill Jaden's hand was magnified many times. It was magnified to the point that even Duque and Tyrant, who were thousands of meters away, could see it clearly. It was a lifelike black, translucent humanoid spirit. On the spirit body, a black robe wrapped around this slender and slightly demonic body. It posed in a handsome pose, its face full of complacency, evil, and mysteriousness. Ah! Tyrant exclaimed. She knew what it was. It was Duque's soul. Not good. Tyrant was not an ignorant woman. As the high priestess of the moon goddess, she had more opportunities to come into contact with information about demons, killing, destroying, devouring bodies, and even souls. Souls were the last thing that demons could get their hands on. Once one's soul was controlled by a demon, whether it was turned into a disgusting and indescribable existence or destroyed completely depended on the demon's preferences. Duque tilted his head slightly and explained to Tyrant, if I want to become a Void Lord, how can I not give up a part of my soul? Otherwise, the leader of the Burning Legion would not have given me such an important task. Tyrant's heart felt as if it had fallen into the deepest and darkest hell of despair, and there was no longer any warmth in her. The hatred and resentment that Duque had towards her for everything that he had done to her disappeared at this moment. Even though he knew that he would probably die, and even his soul might fall into hell and suffer for billions of years, he still gave the Burning Legion the most tragic counterattack. This kind of heroic spirit was not something that mortals could imagine or even compare to. What was greatness? This was greatness. What was a hero? This was a hero, even though Illidan and Malfurion were outstanding heroes. Compared to what Duque had done, their actions were insignificant. Looking at the only white eyes in the darkness, Tyrant felt as if she had stopped breathing and her heart had stopped beating. Even time seemed to have stopped for a moment. Are you telling me that if you die, I have to complete the last step for you? Tyrant followed Duque's gaze and saw the third button. It was a red button with a warning tone. So, you've already prepared everything? Is that the final button that allows you to continue the plan even if your soul collapses? Duque's lips curled into a smile, but Duque's smile froze in that instant. This was because Jaden had already crushed Duque's soul avatar in his rage with a palm covered in hellfire. Ah! Duque screamed and knelt down on the spot. Sargeras let out a sinister laugh that shook the entire distorted void. Infernal affairs, don't think that death is the end. This is just the beginning, Sargeras was furious. The grand plan that he had been planning for so long had been ruined by a small traitor. He couldn't even wait for Duque to die. With a wave of his hand, he snatched Duque's soul from Jaden's hands and gave him the most terrifying soul punishment. That's right. Just like how he had done the soul punishment hundreds of thousands of times before, he only had to activate the spell and he could use this part of the soul that had been processed by a secret spell to pull over Duque's entire soul. Then he could. Tyrant's entire body trembled. She didn't know how painful the soul punishment was, but she had heard the cries of her sisters who had died in the hands of Eridar's Gemini. None of the physical punishments in the world could make people cry out in despair like that. She wanted to say that she could imagine what kind of pain it was, but she couldn't lie to herself. Looking at the trembling Duque, who was sweating profusely, she shouted in her heart, "Tyrant! There's no time to be weak. Don't let Duquang's efforts go to waste. For Azeroth. For the goddess. And even more for Dukong. You have to be strong. Tyrant." Tyrant couldn't care less about Duque beside her. She used all her courage and strength to pounce forward like a cheetah and hit the last red button with her fist. With the press of the button, the 12 satellites suddenly rotated, and after countless teleportations, the magic power accumulated in the satellites burst out at this moment. They were arranged according to the time of the clock. The next moment, the magic on all the satellites gathered at the center point. When the 12 white-hot light beams gathered into one, it released a dazzling light that was as dazzling as the birth of a new star. A thick energy cannon was shot out. From afar, it looked like a solid object. In less than 1,000th of a second, the terrifying high-energy cluster covered the distance of more than 10,000 meters and pierced into the base of the Burning Legion, the void fortress that was generally prismatic and built from the inside out of a giant meteorite. As the base of the Burning Legion for more than 10,000 years, the surface of the fortress was mostly covered with precious metals such as krypton gold. The interior was constructed with an unknown alloy that had been treated with high magical protection. In fact, most of the defensive walls inside the fortress were handmade from the remnants of the interstellar battleships that Sargeras had stolen from the Pantheon. But even with the outer layer of super hard metal and the inner wall made from the interstellar battleship shell, it still failed after resisting for a few seconds. The light beam pierced through the fortress's anus and reached the interior. All the huge compartments along the way were instantly set ablaze due to the void extracting oxygen and air. The explosion was extinguished in an instant. Small white light bubbles quickly appeared and extended to the area near the damaged area. In all fairness, the power of this cannon was not small. It was enough to withstand the energy waves caused by hundreds of interstellar battleships exploding at the same time. This meant that in that instant, the Void Fortress had lost tens of thousands of demons. Sargeras didn't care. Compared to the Burning Legion, which had hundreds of millions of soldiers, the loss of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, or even tens of millions would not affect the Burning Legion's foundation. However, Being hid in the fortress's central warehouse where the demonic crystals were stored would cause an explosion that could affect the entire Void Fortress and destroy the billions of demons within it. That was another matter altogether. Chapter 1069. Dark energy had never been a stable and peaceful energy. High-purity dark energy crystals that stored large amounts of dark energy were even harder to deal with. The dark energy obtained after destroying countless planets and slaughtering billions of lives was good stuff, but with the Burning Legion's half-baked science, all the demonic craftsmen could think of was to gather the dark energy, separate it into compartments, and store it away from the outside world as much as possible. Who would have thought that once it was hit by high energy, the dark energy crystals would become a more terrifying existence than a nuclear bomb? A super explosion that no one could have imagined happened. The Burning Legion's triumvirate turned their heads, and looked at everything before them in horror and despair. The colossal fortress that they had operated for a full 15,000 years, the Void Fortress that was as big as a planet, and who knew how many billions of demons had been stuffed into it, at this moment, as the explosion spread throughout the entire fortress, one could see terrifying bulges that looked like blisters and lumps on the surface of the fortress. Pft, pft, pft. No sound could be heard in the void, but that was what their nerves told the triumvirate. Expand. Expand. Expand again. Anyone could see that the Void Fortress was done for. 3 long yet brief seconds passed, and the entire fortress burst into the brightest green light. In the next instant, the green light that seemed ready to extend infinitely retracted, forming a black hole that devoured life, matter, and everything around it, even light. No. Sargeras let out the most miserable scream he had ever let out since he fell. Ever since the Pantheon's rebellion, his 15,000 years of hard work had been destroyed in his lair. Tyron stared blankly at the scene on the holographic screen. She was crying, and 2 streams of tears had uncontrollably dyed her face red. She was laughing, because she suddenly felt that the burden on her shoulders since the Burning Legion's invasion had vanished. At the same time, she had accomplished everything she had to do. Dukong. Hey. Do you see that? I fulfilled our wish. The Burning Legion has been dealt a heavy blow. We've succeeded. I'm here to accompany you now. Perhaps we will suffer eternal torture together. But I don't care as long as I'm with you. At the last moment, Tyron thought of the Stormrage brothers, but she quickly pushed them out of her mind and turned towards Duque like a moth to a flame. Turning Duque's body over, Tyron began to rain kisses on Duque's face like a madwoman. She didn't know when the Burning Legion's Big Three would come to deal with her, but she didn't expect to return to the forest that gave birth to her. She wanted to seize the last chance to be intimate with Duque. At this moment, a scare happened. Duque suddenly grabbed her waist and scolded, "Stupid woman. Stop kissing me. You're hindering my spell casting." Casting spells? What spell? Tyrant, who was in a state of confusion, asked subconsciously. Duque cursed, "Of course it's to open a portal and run away. If we don't run after acting tough, are we going to wait for the 3 heavyweights to kill us?" Huh? What's wrong with you? Tyrant was extremely shocked, and then ecstatic. She wanted to ask Dukong why his soul wasn't taken away. Let's run first. Duque jumped into a portal with Tyrant in his arms. On the other side, the Burning Legion's Big Three also realized that something was wrong. Oh no. Impossible. How could he? By the time they wanted to stop it, it was already too late. Firstly, they were caught off guard. Secondly, the space around them had already started to shatter. Thirdly, in terms of spatial magic, none of them could compare to Duque. The 3 of them, who could destroy a world with just a raise of their hands and feet, could not do anything. They could only watch as Duke, whose soul should have been shattered and whom they could do whatever they wanted to him, jumped up and ran away with the girl. He ran away. That's right. He really ran away. Ah, Sargeras, Archimonde, and Kill, Jaden let out furious, heart-wrenching, and abnormally twisted roars at the same time. None of the Void Lords dared to go near the 3 heavyweights. They were afraid that they would be destroyed if they offended them. The Eridar twins were terrified as they hugged each other and trembled. They knew that since the infernal affairs had run away, someone else would have to take the blame. They had single-handedly selected the infernal affairs, so they had no way to escape. In the void, everything around them was strange and blurry. Images that had been distorted by time and space rushed towards them at high speed, and then were thrown far behind them. She hugged Duque tightly, feeling Duque's warmth and heartbeat. Tyron didn't dare to do anything drastic. Because interstellar travel was a very dangerous thing. If she didn't die in the distorted void after completing such a feat, it would be a joke if she ended up hanging in a spatial crack somewhere in the universe. How did you avoid the soul punishment? Unable to suppress her curiosity, Tyron chose to ask the question that had been in her heart for a long time. My soul is a little special. Once I lose it, it has nothing to do with the core of my soul. Ah. That's possible? Tyron was a little shocked. The universe is very big. Anything can happen. Yeah. Tyron didn't ask any more. She quietly rested her head on Duque's chest. How did Duque avoid the soul punishment of kill Jaden? Don't forget. Duque was the one and only person in this world who could resurrect himself. His soul was the most special existence. Every time he died, Duque would lose his soul and humanity. Once his soul left Duque, it would be like losing his moral integrity. It would have nothing to do with Duque anymore. Would a person who was used to having his soul deducted for a long time, and who could do good deeds, fuse with or inherit the soul, integrity, of a saint really be afraid of soul damage like normal beings? Stop joking. Even Duque himself didn't know how much of his soul was originally his after inheriting Medivh and Alonsis Fail's moral integrity, how long had passed. Tyron didn't know either. She just realized that she was enjoying the process of being alone with Duque. There was no more responsibility or terrifying threats. There was only peace and security. How she wished that this kind of time could continue endlessly. Unfortunately, after a series of rumbling sounds, Tyron suddenly realized that she and Duque had returned to Azhara City. However, it was Azhara City that was on the verge of destruction. Even though Duque had absorbed most of the power of the Well of Eternity when he sucked Sargers away, the destruction still continued. It was just that it was slightly less than expected. Stepping out of the teleportation gate, Duque was a little stunned. He saw a familiar face not far from him, looking at him in shock, Saleya Ubatilia. Chapter 1070. Outside the side hall that Duque had once stayed in, a violent gale was howling incessantly, and thunder rumbled incessantly. However, the side hall that had been secretly solidified by a certain person with a magic seal seemed to be the only safe island in the whirlpool of despair that was the Well of Eternity. Ever since he descended into this world, Duque had not had the chance to go anywhere other than the twisting nether and Azhara City. He was no longer a mage, so he could only use the space magic array that he had asked the warlocks of Eridar to prepare in advance to teleport. Setting the space seat here was a last resort. However, Duque did not expect that this elf maid, who was once tied up by the queen and could be stripped naked with a pinky, would appear here at this time. It was hard to describe the look in Salegia's eyes. Was it guilt? Fear? Longing for redemption? Or asking for pity? He did not know. It was probably all kinds of emotions, but they were all mixed up in her eyes. Even though the surroundings were noisy, Salegia could clearly hear the sigh that came from Duque's lips. Sigh, an invisible and untouchable barrier appeared between their hearts. There was no word, but Duque's eyes said, I gave you a chance. Yes. Duque had tested her before. If this woman, whom he named Salegia, could keep all of his secrets, he would use other channels to let Queen Azhara know about the ancient gods. It was a pity that Salegia had always played the role of a spy here, just like what he had done in the Burning Legion. Duque was not a fickle person. If he were to abandon her like this, he would not be able to forgive himself. Seeing that Silegia had served him and Tyrant diligently, Duque taught her many things, such as the creation of magic circuits, the use of nature magic, and a few inconspicuous spells that would soon become very important to her. However, this was the limit. Looking at Duque, who no longer had a dark aura around him and was instead glowing with a gentle golden light, it was clear to Celia that Duque was a member of the Allied army. His entire body trembled violently, and his mouth squirmed for a long time, but not a single word came out. However, the pleading look in his eyes became even more intense. Sure. She still wanted to beg Duque to bring her along. Duque shook his head decisively. Everyone has to be responsible for their own actions. No matter what my identity is, since you chose to be loyal to your empress and didn't swear to be loyal to me from that moment onwards, the result is already set in stone. Ignoring Silegia, who was kneeling on the ground and crying, Duque led Tyrant up to the balcony on the second floor. Suddenly, Celia's voice came from behind Duque. If fate allows me to choose again and I choose you, will you accept me? Duque stopped in his tracks. As a transmigrator, he knew very well what was going to happen next. Was it fate? Was it a coincidence? Or was it a prank? Even Duque himself didn't know why he did this. He smiled. His smile was mysterious and filled with certainty. Do you still remember the first spell I taught you? Celia, who had already given up all hope, suddenly raised her head and nodded vigorously as if she had found a life-saving straw in her most desperate moment. Her eyes were filled with tears. It was unknown whether they were tears of regret, desire for redemption, or both. Duque said leisurely, "Not everyone has the right to stand by my side. Back then, I entered the Burning Legion with the determination to endure 10,000 years of torture. If you have the courage and perseverance, when we meet again, I will accept you as my maidservant." Duque left. He left in a carefree manner. He didn't take a single cloud with him, but he also left a bitter maidservant behind. He didn't know if this would become an ill-fated relationship, but at the very least, Duque had no regrets. He didn't owe Silegia anything. Walking up to the balcony, they heard a deafening rumble. Even Duque felt a little scared, let alone Tyrant. "Look!" Tyrant whispered into his ear, "Azhara City." They looked into the distance. What they saw was a terrifying scene. The ground of Azhara City had been split in half. The core of the city had fallen into a huge canyon that was at least a few kilometers deep. The entire inner city was sliding towards the Well of Eternity, and the city was surrounded by water. Only by craning their necks to the highest point could they see the huge waterfall that seemed to reach the sky. Yes. Azhara City was in the middle of a huge whirlpool of water. The Well of Eternity was dragging the nearby ground towards its deep hole, as if it was going to swallow the whole of Kalimdor. Azhara City floated on the black water, and the isolated island floated up and down like the wreckage on the water's surface. The funny thing was that the Elven Palace was still standing there, almost undamaged. As Azhara City neared the center of the whirlpool, ominous lightning flashed around the city. Unlike most of the things that left Kalimdor, Azhara City was heading straight for the center of the lake. Duque felt Tyrant's grip tighten. She hugged Duque's waist tightly, as if she wanted to melt her soft and elastic body into Duque's. Duque wasn't worried about his own safety. His entire body was emitting a pure golden holy light, as dazzling as a lighthouse in the dark. No matter what the reason was, as long as the leaders of Azeroth wanted to know what had happened in the twisting nether, they definitely wouldn't let Duque die so easily. Moreover, he was hugging the high priestess of the moon goddess Elun. There was no need to call for help at all. For huge figures of different colors rushed out of the clouds at high speed, falling straight down. The Dragon Kings descended rapidly from the sky and hovered in the air. This was the flying ability of the Dragon Kings. Alexstrasza, Malygos, Isra, and Nozdormu, the 4 Dragon Kings surrounded the side hall next to the forbidden palace of Azhara. The Red Dragon Queen stretched her long dragon neck. "There's no time. Quickly ride me." Duque smiled and hugged Tyrant. He turned around and rode on the back of the most respected dragon queen in the world of Azeroth. The 4 dragon kings flapped their wings and stirred up a gust of wind, even blowing away the ominous storms and lightning around them. Suleika's lonely figure stood at the top of the stairs, watching as the dragon kings climbed up quickly. Duque turned into a small dot and completely disappeared from her sight. Chapter 1071. Sitting on the throne in the Forbidden Palace, Azhara's face lost all its color. "It's over," she murmured. "Everything is over." Azhara's maids screamed wildly around her. The queen held an empty wine glass in her hand, unwilling to believe what had happened. She was Azhara, the brightest light. She was the light, and the light was her. She was her, the supreme ruler of her people. Even though she knew that destruction was right in front of her, she still stubbornly told herself that she would never allow such a thing to happen. Sargeras refused to marry her. She was just a pitiful creature that was abandoned after being used. Perhaps many of her followers saw this humiliating scene, but she still didn't want to admit to them that she was wrong. She abandoned her people, and in the end, she was abandoned by the god that she worshipped. How ironic was this? How bitter was this? The rumbling sound of destruction grew louder and louder. The palace, which had sunk to the bottom of the water, began to be shrouded in darkness. Even the night elves' dark vision couldn't see through it. The only light in the palace came from the violent power of the Well of Eternity. The dark lake water began to surge into the palace, washing away her 2 maids. The maids let out shrill screams and quickly disappeared into the lake water. "I am Azhara," the queen muttered in her heart, her expression still cold. She cast a spell, and a magic shield suddenly appeared around her and the living maid beside her. "My wish is the highest." She used her powerful magic to block the lake water, but as the water got deeper, the pressure on the magic shield increased. Azhara's brows furrowed, and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. This was the first time in her life that she had sweated. At this moment, the familiar and disgusted voice in the darkness whispered to her. "We have a way to make you stronger, stronger than before. We can help you." The queen wasn't stupid at all. Especially when a woman had just woken up from a dream of love, this woman was definitely at the smartest moment of her life. She knew that her shield wouldn't last long. Soon, the cold water would swallow her and her followers, and the glory of Azhara's city would disappear from this world forever. The silver-haired elf queen nodded. "Ah!" Accompanied by a scream, the glass fell from her hand. Pain shot through her body. She felt her limbs twisting and entwining. She could also feel her back turning into liquid, as if it had suddenly melted. Her magic shield was obliterated. Azhara screamed in despair as she was drowned by the lake water. She could also hear other people's voices coming from the depths of the lake. Her maids, her guards, and other highborn elves who still served her. The lake water quickly filled her lungs, but she did not drown. Riding Alexstrasza, Duque watched from the sidelines as the city that symbolized the highest arcane civilization of the Night Elves was sucked into the center of the giant whirlpool. Duque didn't know whether he was following history or changing it. For a moment, he even had the mischievous thought that if Azhara's city could be blown into pieces before it sank to the bottom, a new masterpiece would be born. Unfortunately, since he dared to attract the ancient gods and even used Queen Azhara to trick Sargeras, then the ancient gods that joined him, such as Enzos, would definitely not let Queen Azhara and her followers go. It was very likely that after a few centuries, a new horror would be born under the sea. Duque shifted his gaze away from the center of the Well of Eternity. Witnessing the standard world-shattering disaster quickly dissipate in all directions, Lin Feng's eyes widened in shock. Large pieces of land on the ancient Kalimdor continent were still being pulled into the lake, and the power of the horrifying scene didn't diminish at all. It looked like a domino effect. The land kept falling, and the horizon kept expanding. The only fortunate thing was that because the Burning Legion was massacring with Azhara's city as the center, all the creatures in the vicinity had basically run away. Otherwise, it would have been another large-scale massacre, and Duque might have felt a little guilty. What a pity. Mountains were uprooted one after another. Large tracts of land split open in the raging whirlpool, and then disappeared into the center of the whirlpool. Sitting on the Red Dragon Queen and looking down, Duque saw the land where the elves lived disappear without a trace in the blink of an eye. No power could withstand the destructive impact of the Well of Eternity. Perhaps to nature, even the bloody massacre of the Burning Legion was nothing. After all, what the Burning Legion did couldn't compare to what was happening now. Beyond his reach, the wheel of history still followed its inherent inertia and continued to move forward. Without the influence of external forces, everything was inevitable. A red dragon approached his queen at high speed. Ronan sat on a red dragon and waved his arms vigorously. Seeing that his master was safe and sound, he was very excited. "Do, Master Kong." Ronan, who was still very innocent, almost let it slip. Duque rolled his eyes at him. A few more dragons came over. Grom clearly saw Duque, and then, humph. He snorted and turned his head away. No one knew if he was sulking because he couldn't repay the favor, or if it was something else. Krasus also came with a smile. On the other hand, Vanessa, the maid with a belly full of evil tricks, didn't say anything, but when Duke looked at her. This bad maid, who often challenged her master in all sorts of ways, looked at Tyrant in Duque's arms. Her face was full of mockery, and she actually mouthed a few words to Duque: bird, beast, male, baron. No, no, no. The wind must be too strong, and my eyes must be playing tricks on me. Confess and be lenient, and you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. As an honest and reliable young master, how could Dumok admit to such a thing? It must be an illusion. This is definitely the world's fault. Ha 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 ha. In the distance, the outline of Mount Hyjal appeared on the horizon. Looking down from the sky, Duque could see the main force of the night elves moving toward Mount Hyjal. Their blue-purple figures were easy to recognize. Behind them, the waves of destruction were still far behind them, seemingly chasing them closely. Tyrant suddenly became nervous. She asked Duque, "My compatriots, will they escape?" Duque looked at the ground, and the system elf quickly compared the surrounding environment with the geography of 10,000 years in the future. If he didn't make a mistake, this would already be the territory of Duroder in the future. Fraud Duque was very sure, it's okay, the disaster won't reach here. Chapter 1072. Duque's words sounded more like some sort of subconscious comfort, but Tyrant believed him without a doubt. Tyrant no longer had any doubts about Duke's abilities as he was able to teleport the two of them back before the Burning Legion's 3 leaders could regain their senses and go on a rampage. If Duque said it was fine, then it was fine. Her heart, which had just started to waver, quickly calmed down. Mount Hyjal was getting closer and closer. As another base of the Night Elves' nature faction, Tyrant felt reassured every time she came to Mount Hyjal. Suddenly, Tyrant heard the goddess's voice. "My child, you've worked hard. Can I trouble you to persuade your companion to come to Mount Hyjal?" Tyrant hesitated when she heard this. She had heard from Malfurion about a few mysterious powerhouses. Including Du Kong beside him, there were a total of 3 humans. These were humans who were completely different from the humans of Kalimdor. They were powerful, mysterious, proficient in all kinds of spells, and had battle techniques that even the best night elf thieves could not master. No one knew where they came from. When they were dealing with the Burning Legion, they obviously had a common goal and naturally formed an alliance. But what about after that? Goddess alone is looking for you? Duque suddenly asked Tyrant after sensing the goddess's power. "Yes, if you don't mind, the goddess hopes that you can go to Mount Hyjal." Tyrant asked carefully. In her days, she seemed to have become that helpless slave girl again. Duque laughed. "Ha! Just nice, I also have something to ask Goddess Alun for help." Since both sides had the same wish, it was easy. Tyrant heaved a sigh of relief and continued to sit behind Duque. She hugged Duque's waist and pressed her Mount Hygel against Duque's back, just like she had done in those days when she needed comfort the most. Unbeknownst to Tyrant, a few hundred meters behind her, a pair of brothers were staring at her from atop two dragons. Illidan shouted in his heart. No. It can't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. Tyrant is mine. At the very least, she would be Malfurion's. How could a jerk suddenly appear and take her away? These voices lingered in Illidan's mind, telling him of the unimaginable. Yes, there was a time when he was jealous of his brother, but he couldn't imagine doing anything that would hurt Malfurion, such as cutting off his left arm. But at such a time, he could not control his thoughts, and felt that this unthinkable thought of his was somehow a comfort to him. If the one who stole Tyrant was her brother, at least the pain of losing her would be slightly alleviated. Deep in his heart, Illidan still hoped that Tyrant would turn back and abandon the human spy who had once served Kil'jaeden. Perhaps there was still a glimmer of hope. Given time, Tyrant would realize that the two of them were more outstanding than the infernal affairs, and he was more outstanding than his elder brother. Perhaps to many couples, Tyrant's current actions were undoubtedly the greatest betrayal of their feelings. Perhaps, many men would turn their love into hate because of this. But at this moment, Illidan, who was wearing a green turban, and his elder brother, Malfurion, who was wearing the traditional green hat of the Druids, looked at each other and saw that they did not regret their choice. Of course, he chose to forgive her. Yes. As childhood sweethearts, this was an inevitable choice. However, compared to his elder brother who was prepared to do nothing, Illidan had a more radical approach. He secretly pinched his chest, where there were a few bottles of well water from the Well of Eternity. This was not the water that flowed into the magic vein and was diluted by the river water. This was the purest well water from the forbidden palace of Azhara. If I do something like this, Tyrant will definitely look at me differently, Illidan silently told himself. Dragons were the fastest flying creatures in this era. Not long after, the 4 dragon kings arrived at the peak of Mount Hygel. It was only when the magnificent temple of the Moon Lady entered her vision that Tyrant realized that she had returned to her own life. That's right. Unless the goddess changed her mind, she would once again become the beautiful high priestess of the temple of the Moon Lady that countless people looked up to and worshipped. Tyrant, high priestess. Tyrant could already hear the cheers of the Elun sisters below. She awkwardly shifted to keep her distance from Duque and waved to the sisters. As they got closer and closer to the ground, Tyrant subconsciously felt a little timid. She had no idea how to tell her sisters about her experiences over the past few days. She did not know what the goddess of Elun had told her sisters, but it seemed that the sisters did not have a bad impression of her because she had been captured by the demons. Instead, their eyes were filled with fanatical worship. Tyrant did not have time to ask, because after she and Duque were put down, the 4 dragon kings quickly transformed into their human forms. They urgently needed a meeting to understand the situation of the Burning Legion. Alexstrasza walked at the front, followed by the 3 dragon kings, Duque, and finally Tyrant, Ronan, and the other transmigrators who walked behind Duque. Many ancient dragons also turned into human forms and guarded the perimeter of the Temple of the Moon Lady, preventing anyone from getting close. It was originally still daytime. The moment Elun's will descended, the sky above the central hall of the Moon God Temple turned from day to night. As the bright moonlight filled the entire hall, Duque could feel the will of the goddess turning into a large ball of gentle light that enveloped him. Hello. Expert from another world, may I ask what name I should use to address you? Infernal Affairs? Or Mr. Dukong? Elun's voice was gentle, and it was easy to associate her with the role of a mother. Duque bowed and replied respectfully, a name is just a code. We have our own difficulties that we cannot tell you our real names, please forgive us. So if possible, please call me by my fake name, Dukong. Alright, Dukong. First of all, thank you and your friends for choosing the side of Azeroth in this war. We thank you on behalf of the billions of lives in Azeroth. An illusory white humanoid woman covered in white light appeared, looking like a marshmallow. But there was no doubt that it contained Elun's will. Elun bowed to Duque. Not only her, but the 4 dragon kings, including Alexstrasza, also bowed to Duque. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.